welcome back to the Movies Made Us Do It. Me and Matt are back. How are you, Matt?
I am pretty good, sir. How are you?
Hot!
Yes, it is a bit warm.
Fucking boiling. It's that time of year. I'm glad I'm in the new flat, because the old flat right now, oh my god.
Oh god, your greenhouse flat,
oh
yeah.
my god. So at least it's not that, but I have got a fan on, so apologies if you can hear that. I think it's okay, because it's in a position where it shouldn't be hitting the mic. But if it does, I apologize, but it's very hot.
Yeah.
It's muggy. Horrible English heat.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I'm okay. I'm really looking forward to covering Star Trek 3.
Yeah.
The Search for Spock. Because it's the 40th anniversary of this movie.
It is.
And I turned 40 yesterday, so I was like, oh, that'd be really fun to do a movie on the week of my birthday that came out the year of my birthday. So
it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not a bad one. It could have been better, if I had Wrath of Khan or, But as far as Star Trek movies go, I think it's the best odd movie. So there's that.
Yes.
Although
Yeah,
although we were discussing this off air last week, how over the years, I think the older we're getting, the more we're appreciating the motion picture. And just thinking the motion picture is amazing now. And it's like, when I was a kid, it was the boring one that I always skipped.
Yeah, when we both said, when we
covered it, yeah.
Covered it and we first watched it when we were kids, it's like, what the hell is this movie? Why is it so long? Why is it so boring? And why is nothing happening?
Yeah.
And it is amazing how, well, I guess it's not amazing, really. It's just the way you...
It's the way you work, isn't it?
You grow up and you get old, I guess.
When I was a kid, I just wanted gore, violence, and action.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I want character and dialogue and all the things that I didn't used to really care about now mean everything to me in a movie. Yeah. So... but I think this movie does a fantastic job, actually, of paying off a lot from Wrath of Khan, and it's a nice reflection on Wrath of Khan. I think it does a very good job of being a sequel to Wrath of Khan.
Let's face it, it's got a pretty steep hill to climb.
Oh god, yeah, it was never going to reach the dizzying heights of Wrath of Khan, which arguably saved Star Trek from the bin.
Yes.
And as we've said before, or I've certainly said before, I don't think that Wrath of Khan is just a good Star Trek movie. I think Wrath of Khan is a good movie. It's a film that, even if you're not a Star Trek fan, I truly believe you can watch Wrath of Khan and you will see a fantastic film.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's to a lesser degree this movie. There were certain Star Trek films, but I think if I was going to say to a non-Star Trek fan, I'd say, well, watch Wrath of Khan, because that is a good movie. It's not just a good Star Trek film; that's a really good movie.
That's the double-edged sword of Wrath of Khan, though, isn't it? You say, well, watch Wrath of Khan, and then you go, well, you're setting your shop up really early.
Yeah, and then it's all downhill from there. It's just shit from there.
Until you get to Undiscovered Country, it might.
Which I've said before, on some days, Undiscovered Country edges Wrath of Khan out for me. I love Undiscovered Country. I really love it.
It's got certain emotional punches, that movie. So,
It gets close for me.
Definitely.
But we're here to talk about Search for Spock. When did you first see Search for Spock?
On video, when I was a kid.
Yeah, same. It was a rental. Or maybe on TV, one or the other.
I was 7 when it came out. Yeah, 7.
Right.
8-ish. 8. 8. Yeah, 8. I've been 8. So yeah, I've watched it when I was very little.
Yeah. It's one of those movies that's been with me my whole life. It feels like, Well, it has literally been with me.
Well, that's
my whole
it.
life,
That's true, isn't it? But... It's a movie that's been with me since I was tiny. So it's
Yeah. It's.
I did discover something shocking yesterday when I went to watch it.
Go on.
I don't own it.
You don't own it?
No, I went to my shelf and it's not there.
I didn't even think to ask you that when I suggested it. I was like, of course you own it. That's not. It didn't even cross my mind.
I'm sure I did. I'm sure.
Have you?
I've got the rest.
Yeah, that's really bizarre. That's a bizarre one to have missed. If you'd thrown 5 in the bin, I would have been like, well, yeah, fair enough.
Unfortunately, no, I've got 5. 5 is right there. But for some reason, 3, no. I have no idea whether...
So did you have to rent it, or...?
Yeah, I did. I had to Amazon it.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. It was a foregone conclusion to me that you had that movie.
It was a conclusion I made myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, at some point I'm gonna have to well, I say rebuy it. I'm
It must be
100% certain
somewhere.
I had it.
There's no way that you would have that gap in your collection.
No, it was really weird. It was like, oh, okay.
My brain won't allow me to have a gap like that in my collection. Like even like with Godzilla movies, I've even got like 98 because I'm like, well, it's a gap. Otherwise. I can't have a gap. You know,
it's on its own. It's in the corner.
Yeah, it is
next to the room.
It's the one. It like honestly is as I upgrade certain films to Blu-ray, I've upgraded all of my Showa era to Blu-ray, and as decent quality Blu-rays or 4Ks come out of Godzilla movies, I'm buying them. That's the one that will probably forever stay on DVD, unless I see it in a charity shop like super cheap on Blu-ray. I can't imagine I will ever upgrade that one. So, but yeah. I think you own it somewhere.
My guess is I lent it to someone at some point and just didn't get it back.
Yeah.
A lot of my Doctor Who videos are like that.
Yeah.
I've got a huge. The worst thing is that all the good Doctor Who ones, my favourite included, Caves of Androzani. I know who's got them, but I haven't seen him for years, so
right.
I'm probably never going to get those back.
No, Caves of Androzani is superb.
It's my favourite Doctor Who.
Yeah, it's my second favourite. I've said before, Pyramids of Mars. Which they've now ruined. No, they haven't ruined it. I don't care.
I mean, yeah.
Who cares? I don't care. I still love it. I love Pyramids of Mars. It's such a good story. But
when this Bruce says it's the worst television he's ever seen, that was funny.
I'm just glad I'm not watching it anymore. You know,
yeah,
I don't have to deal with any of this. I'm like, yeah, okay. I hear it's terrible. And yeah.
You've seen the design for him for Sutek.
It looked like a CGI abomination to me.
It's like a weird sort of it looked more like Anubis than...
Yeah, I saw that and I was like, that's weird.
That was strange.
Surely if you're going to do nostalgia, you'd have him... You'd upgrade the suit, wouldn't you? I would.
Yeah.
Because you'd want that. You'd want that classic look, I would have thought. But...
two pretty iconic looks.
Yeah,
and
they went for neither.
Yeah.
Unless it happens in the episode and it's just not been on the trailers or whatever, the clips. But yeah. Anyway, we're here to talk about a good film. So, shall we?
Indeed.
So, we pick up immediately. Well, during the events of Wrath of Khan, at least you do on the Blu-ray edition. You get the picture-in-picture. You get a really tiny little square of blue. As we see the death of Spock. Spoilers. If you haven't watched Wrath of Khan. And
well, they did that because they wanted to make sure that if you hadn't seen,
well, it is because they do follow on that these 2, 3, and 4 are like and 5 I guess to an extent, but 2, 3, and 4 certainly they're like a trilogy of films that
it does though sort of. I mean, I'm sure there are people that did that this is their first Star Trek movie,
quite possibly.
But you sort of think, it says Star Trek 3 in the title.
I wouldn't go see a film that said 3 in the title without seeing at least the one before it. Like, it's just not a good idea. But yeah, we get the amazing scene. We probably won't go into it too much because we will one day cover Wrath of Khan, no doubt, and go into it in great detail.
I think we already did.
Okay, we already did it. Right.
I think we did it.
It's good to know.
I think it's one of those ones that's lost to history.
No, nothing's lost. There's only one review lost to history. Get Carter is the only one lost to history.
Yeah, that's terrible.
I still want to find that. I'm determined it's somewhere. It's got to be somewhere.
Yeah, we have to find that one because that's one of my favourite movies.
I'm going to dig through the archive because I've got an archive of all of these things. I just need to find it in there. It must be in there. But yeah, so following, we're following on directly from Wrath of Khan. Spock's dead. They have did the funeral. They sent him down to the Genesis planet, which was formed at the end of Wrath of Khan by Khan, setting off the Genesis device. And we catch up now with the Enterprise crew as they have it effectively made enough repairs. Scott's fixed it enough to where they can at least get back to space dock.
Yeah. And I love that the line, the Enterprise feels like a house without the children.
Oh God, it's such a great line, isn't it?
The children gone. It's like, wow.
I also love the I actually really love the shots from the planet as well as we open with that the going through the clouds and then seeing the jungle, and then you see Spock's
the torpedo. Yeah. His coffin, if you like.
Yeah, and I did think it did make me wonder. I was like, did they reuse those cloud shots in Star Trek 4? Because I think they might have done.
Probably.
For when the bird of prey is flying over Manhattan. Yeah. Or when it goes out to sea. But yeah, that line of the, because that's funny you say that, because that was a line I was going to pick up on as well, because I think it is such a wonderful line.
Yeah, and he says that, I left the better part of me on that planet base. He's like, wow, that's, and that completely, just those lines, just that completely set up his relationship. Like, I guess, if you hadn't seen,
yeah, if you didn't know these characters or their motivations or their friendship, that is enough to give you everything you need to know. Yeah, beautifully voiceovered scene, because he doesn't act it. He's not saying it out loud. He's just going about his business. But it is a wonderful voice acting piece that. You can hear the emotion in his voice, and yeah, it's really, really wonderful.
And I also like that even though they've been through absolute hell, there's still hope in the young officers. They're still sort of.
Oh well, assume we get that asshole who's like, is there going to be a ceremony when we get back? It was like, oh, fuck off.
Yeah, but I think that's sort of like a proof that they're still young and sort of ready to go, and this whole incident hasn't beaten them down.
No, it hasn't, and it's amazing, really. It kind of, again, it goes to that, like, well, they're effectively naval officers, they're professional. In private, Kirk is saying these things in his private log, but in public, on the bridge, he's still joking occasionally. Even Scott, who lost his nephew or whatever in Wrath of Khan here, he's like joking with Kirk, and it's back to business. We've got time to grieve in private, but in public we're going to do our job. But yeah, an absolutely wonderful opening. I love the bit when Kirk says to Chekhov, he's like, I need someone on science. And Chekhov's like, clearly like,
I love that look he gives.
Christ. Yeah, because he's like, oh shit, yeah, okay.
It's it's like, oh my god, I'm stepping in his shoes. Yeah. No, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. It's that moment of like, oh god.
Yeah. And you get the lovely Scotty line about
8 weeks.
So how long is it going to take to fix the Enterprise to get her up and running again? 8 weeks. But you don't have 8 weeks, so I'll do it in 2. And he's like, do you always multiply your... He's like, yeah, of course I do. How else are you going to know I'm a miracle worker?
Yeah, how else am I going to maintain my my reputation as a miracle worker? And he's like, your reputation is safe, Scotty, don't worry about it. And then you do get the young cadet, or at least young officer, who is like, is there gonna be a ceremony when he gets back, and when we get back to space dock? And Kirk's like, well, you think a hero's welcome, and he kind of nods, and Kirk's like, well, God, Lord knows we deserve it. This time we've paid with our dearest blood, I think he says something like that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in space, there is a transaction going on, or about to go on. We have this freighter crew. They have stolen, or somehow come into possession, of information on the Genesis device, and are looking to sell it. And we meet a female Klingon who is on the bridge with them. And is this the first time we have seen a cloaking device, at least in the movies, right? I think.
Yes.
So I guess it's almost an introduction to, because did the Klingons have cloaking devices in the TOS? I can't remember now. I think they did, or at least the trouble is it gets confusing because the Romulans also used what would be considered Klingon ships in some episodes of Star Trek. So it's really weird. But
I don't think they did.
I don't think they did. But I think the Romulans had what would become Klingon ships that cloaked, but. Yeah. But here we have the Bird of Prey, and I think this is the first appearance of the Bird of Prey.
Mm-hmm.
Gorgeous design. I love the Bird of Prey.
This is where it all gets a little sort of confused, really, because the original bad guys for this movie were supposed to be the Romulans.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I did not know that. They
were originally supposed to be the Romulans, and weirdly, so there's two guys credited with the creation of the Bird of Prey, but it was
dude. Now that you've said that, the Bird of Prey does have kind of Romulan markings.
Yes,
I hadn't even considered that until right now.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Because it has got the bird painted underneath, kind of.
Exactly.
I never picked up on that before. That's amazing.
Yeah, so apparently Leonard Nimoy was the guy who came, when they asked him what he sort of wanted for the ship, it was him that said, I want, the wings to come round. I want like a swooping bird. I want them to get, to have a long neck, like a bird of prey taking fish out of the water sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it was him that came up with the sort of idea of the swooping wings, and these two guys sort of, came up with how it looked. So yeah, they were originally going to be Romulans, and there was a decision that basically Romulans aren't, people don't know them enough. Everybody knows who the Klingons are.
Yeah, and it felt like Kirk has more history, really, with the Klingons than the Romulans. I mean, he did have some pretty big interactions with the Romulans, but it always felt like, it was always Captain Kirk versus the Klingons.
That's the thing, is when you say Star Trek to non-people, to Star Trek
non-people,
non-Star Trek fans.
Yeah.
If you ask them what do you think of when you say Star Trek, a lot of them will say Klingons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very few of them are going to say Romulans.
Yeah, agreed. It was the right choice, and I think given what happens later in the movie, I think it's perfect that Klingons are the ones to do that, and that it just heightens that rivalry. And also, I mean, this film plays in hugely into Undiscovered Country when we get there.
Yes.
The events of this film. So yeah, no, I agree. I hadn't thought though of the Bird of Prey, and you're absolutely right. It looks Romulan-ish with the bird underneath. That's really interesting. So of course the Bird of Prey decloaks, and it's this, there's that moment where they're like, oh, I don't know what's going on, and it decloaks, and we're introduced to the head Klingon, the captain, Krug or Krudge. I'm not sure. I'm never quite sure.
Yes.
I think it's Krug.
It's Krug.
Who I love. Christopher Lloyd in this role, I think, is superb. This was just before Back to the Future, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of his first massive roles. I mean, I know he was in a couple of things before this.
Well, at this point, most people that knew him would have known him from Taxi.
Yeah.
So,
this
he's
first
the
film
TV
kind
actor
of,
mostly at this point. I mean, he'd been in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I think, which is one of the reasons why he got the job, because I think Moy had seen him in Cuckoo's Nest and thought, that guy's intense enough to pull this off.
Yeah.
I think they won. I think what's his bloody name? Adama in the remake of Galactica.
Blade Runner.
Yes.
Why is his name escaping me? That's really annoying.
This happens every time, though. The joys of getting old, eh?
Yeah, I've hit 40 now. It's happened.
Edward James Olmos.
Yeah, thank you. Well done.
So yeah, I think he was one of the people that was up for it, but no, they wanted that he got the role, and here he plays what is basically the complete template for what is to come.
Well, here we get Klingons. I think you said last time, and you're absolutely right. We get Klingons, what will be Klingons going forward, The honor system, which we see here.
The brutality,
the honor, the savagery. It's all here, and here we get a great showing of that honor.
Yeah,
you know, because this isn't just a female officer. This is clearly Krug's wife,
his lover,
his lover, and you know, she relays that they've got the footage and that she's going to send it over, and that it gives them everything they need. And he has this sad look in his eye, and he's like, "You've seen it?" And she's like, "Yes, Lord. Yes, my Lord. I've seen it." And he just says, "Unfortunate," but you can see the tears in his eyes. He's like, "Oh God, okay."
And she knows exactly what's going to happen.
Oh yeah. She knows, and you know, he says you'll be remembered with, you know, you'll be remembered with honor, and of course the crew are like, "When are we going to get paid?" And she's like, "Payment will be here soon. Don't worry, you're going to get what's coming to you."
It's going to be fine.
And yeah, so he you know, they make it look like they're going to fly away, but of course they back around, and you know, obviously this being the first time we've ever seen a Klingon bird of prey, we see it go into attack mode with the wings come down. And it blows up the ship with his wife, before, you know, retracting the wings back up and heading off.
So that's one of the things I love about this movie is this is not only is this the first time we see the bird of prey.
Yeah,
it's the first time we see that particular freighter, which will go on to be in many episodes of Next Gen, and I think you know, I think it might even show up in a Voyager episode.
I think it shows up in a bunch of stuff, and it's kind of got a Ferengi-like design as well.
Yeah, it does a little.
Yeah, I always thought it kind of might have informed that.
Ferengi,
yeah.
We've also got the first appearance of the Excelsior.
Oh, beautiful. We'll get to that.
And the Oberth.
Yes, the Oberth class. The science ship or medical ship. A ship that was designed only for science or medical, not ever designed to get into battles. You know, like because the Enterprise and the Constitution class, they are science first, but they are also designed to patrol and get into battle, and they're cruisers effectively, aren't they? So while they serve a science function, they are very much military vessels, whereas with the Oberth you get the impression that it's very much just a science vessel, you know.
And again, all of those will be used again and again in many episodes.
I mean, Excelsior keeps. I mean, actually, even the Oberth turns up a couple of times, but Excelsior turns up all the way through. It just never stops. You know, even in DS9.
I think we said when we did
Generations
that the model for the Enterprise B was just the Excelsior model with added parts on it. So you know, it was all, you know, reused, but
which I'm not as much of a fan of. I don't think that redesign.
I like the side bits.
I like it, but I think I prefer the original profile
next to the sensor dome at the front. I love that add-on.
I always assumed it was like an Excelsior B, like it's the next upgrade of Excelsior.
Yeah, a few bits just tacked on to make it look cool. Is it worth?
We're gonna blow up the front of the ship, and we don't want to damage the model. Let's add bits.
The one that I thought was kind of cool and makes a lot of sense is when I saw. I'd not heard this before, but when I was looking it up, apparently the design for the Excelsior, they came up with. The idea was that what would the Enterprise look like if it had been designed by the Japanese?
Okay.
And I think you can kind of see that.
I can kind of see that, yeah.
Okay, it's got a vaguely... I could see that as a sort of, you know, a Japanese design almost. That does make sense.
I can kind of see that, yeah. This is also, I believe, the first appearance of the Starbase, right? The Starbase going forward. Yes. Obviously, we've seen Starbases before, but this is the iconic Starbase that will turn up in even when it makes no sense in next gen, and it somehow just suddenly fits. Like the size difference is quite vast, but sure. Okay.
That was a 6-foot model.
Wow,
that's a nice model.
That's amazing.
With, working doors and everything.
I always thought it looked amazing.
It's
great.
such a
that shot they we're going to get to now. In fact, as we see Enterprise heading towards space dock. That first shot of it is stunning, because you get the full frame of the Enterprise as it flies by, and then it just looks tiny compared to this starbase. You know, it's such a great sense of scale in that shot.
Yeah.
Because it lingers on it for so long as you see the ship kind of going slowly towards it. It absolutely amazing. So as they approach, though, they're cleared for docking, but Chekhov reports that he's getting something from Spock's quarters. He's got a life reading in Spock's quarters. And of course Kirk is like, oh god, everyone's obsessed with Spock, you know, everyone's gone crazy over Spock.
It's a real, oh Jesus, what the fuck is wrong with everybody sort of thing, isn't it? It's like...
But then of course Uhura also gets the she's like, oh, you know, we've been told that the doors to Spock's quarters has been breached, and so, you know, Kirk decides to head down there.
I actually when I was a kid, the model I had of the Enterprise was that damage.
You do want the battle damage. I agree. The battle damage version. There's something I love about these movies. I love that. There's something I love about, particularly in science fiction, spaceships that are just holding it together.
Yeah,
you know, they've just been through the wars, and they're just like Battlestar was a great example of that. The reimagined series where they just had it like it was just battered. You know,
completely. I mean, that whole like basically the spine of that ship broke.
It did in the end. Yeah, that was the when they were like, okay, it's finally done now. You know, it's finally broken.
Like, every time they jump, it gets a little worse. You know, it's
yeah. But anyway, Kirk heads down to Spock's quarters, and we got a couple of the football players down there guarding the door. Those helmets look goofy the first time I watched it. They've always looked goofy, and they kept using them for a while. I was like, oh.
The thing is, I quite like.
I like everything but the helmet.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, it's just the helmet.
Everything else looks kind of
fine. Yeah.
But like you said, it's very. You know, they do look like they've just come from football
or rugby practice or something. Yeah, they kind of remind me more of that British rugby helmet kind of thing.
Well, it's like sort of 1930s sort of football.
Yeah, or 30s football. Yeah, American football maybe.
Yeah, it's like real sort of.
But it just looks
no
really
face guard. So yeah.
Yeah.
I did always find it weird that the security. Because I guess, you know, they could have said, don't go in there until Kirk gets there. But you think the security team surely would have probably gone in and...
I wonder whether...
First?
I wonder whether when Uhura said to the captain, and the captain said, I'm on my way, that was them to say, okay, we have to wait until he gets here now.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I guess they're thinking, like, look, you know... I've just got this promotion onto Enterprise.
Yeah.
I know Kirk loves Spock. I don't want to be the one to go in there and, you know, I don't know. But yeah, so they are waiting, and Kirk enters. And we get the first of what I really, a gimmick I quite like in this movie, where they use Leonard Nimoy's voice a couple of times.
Yeah.
When it's actually DeForest Kelly's Bones, but we get Leonard Nimoy. The best one, I think, is on the bridge when they all look around him when he's talking science.
Yes.
Is saying detecting, you know, life forms or something like that, and it's Leonard Nimoy. But here, Kirk enters the room and is shocked to hear the voice briefly of Spock, and is kind of all shrouded in darkness, and then the lights kind of slowly come on. But we hear Spock effectively saying, you know, Jim, help me, you know, take me home.
Yeah, why did you leave me on Genesis?
Yeah. And of course Kirk obviously grabs this shadowy person and realizes to his horror that it's actually Bones. And I think DeForest Kelley does such a great job with his eyes in this scene. Like, he looks completely out of it.
Yeah.
And Kirk
it
says,
me of is it City on the Edge of Forever when when he loses, he goes, he bugs out. The eyes.
Yeah, he's got the eyes for it for sure. Because of course he tells Kirk to take him to Mount Seleia, and Kirk's like, Mount Seleia? Seleia's on Vulcan, He says, we're home to Earth. We're back home to Earth. And then of course he says, remember, and then he collapses into Kirk's arms. And so of course Kirk calls for medics. But yeah,
we also get the sort of the setup stuff for Sulu and that. So when they're coming into space dock, is it the first time we see?
Oh yeah, and then Sulu's in love with Excelsior immediately. Yeah,
and even Uhura's like, wow, look at that. That's that is a pretty ship. And you can see Scotty again. You get the whole Scotty is like, yeah, all right. And I love that Scotty says, yeah, I've heard they've got transwarp, and Scotty says, yeah, and if my granny had wheels, she'd be a wagon.
Yeah.
I love that.
And what does Kirk say? He's like young minds, fresh ideas, or something like that.
Yeah, I love the whole sort of like, you've got Sulu who's like eager for anything new. He wants to see the new shiny thing, and Scotty's like, there's nothing wrong with the bloody old one,
Well, yeah, and Scotty obviously
we did a new thing for her.
This is where this movie has so much impact, right? Especially the end of this movie. Yeah. Because this is the original Enterprise. Mm-hmm. This is the one that we've been with through the whole TV show. Yep. It got refit, and granted, the refit doesn't make much sense when you put one on top of the other, but that's not the point. The point is it was refitted allegedly, and this is the refitted Enterprise.
It works, goddammit.
It kind of does. They had to do a lot of work. They might as well have started over, but fine.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is the original Enterprise, so they all love this ship, and Scotty loves this ship. This is the ship.
The I mean, we'll get there later, but this is their home. This has been their home for like 20 odd years.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't remember exactly how many years they've been on this bloody ship for now. But
Scotty has never left. I mean, Kirk left. Kirk became Admiral, buggered off for a couple of years, and came back. But Scotty's always been on Enterprise, as far as we know.
And you've got the setup for later movies and stuff, especially with Sulu. And apparently, it was supposed to have turned up first in Wrath of Khan, and Sulu was supposed to be captain then. Apparently.
Oh, really?
That whole storyline got dropped, so it was introduced in this one.
I quite like it. I like that. It's kind of. I think it's quite a bold decision that, like, this early on in hindsight, in the film series. This film kind of, more than any other, well, actually, again, it's continuing the themes of Wrath of Khan, because Wrath of Khan was that, like, we're over the hill now, you're getting old, you need glasses now, you can't see properly, you're aging out, you're in an admiral position, you're chasing the chair, but you shouldn't do that. It's time for you to move on, and Kirk's refusing to move on. Well, here, it's continuing those themes, and we're getting like, well, now here's a bigger and better ship, the new model, the new captain, who seems like he's not really, you get the impression that the captain of the Excelsior, who doesn't last long, gets fired at some point, clearly, or potentially made Admiral.
Well, my guess is he's either made Admiral
or embarrassed by this suitably to where.
Or he's probably on some Miranda class somewhere at the ass end of the universe.
But you get the impression that he's not down with the way that Kirk works. He's not down with that kind of thing. And it's like times are changing. We're moving into what will become next generation.
Yeah.
The Kirk's era is like, and like I said, the ship coming in all battle damaged and scarred, and it's like, oh, it's not really a place for that anymore. We're moving beyond that. But you guys, you cowboys, are still,
with I forget the name of the bloody captain of the.
He's great, by the way. The actor, he plays it perfect.
Yeah,
I hate him so much. He's brilliant.
He's got this sort of like undeserved swagger is what it feels like.
I love the bit
sort of straight out of the sort of officer academy, and he's like hasn't seen any real fucking combat. I mean, we don't know this.
No, you get the impression though, don't you?
But the way he sort of swaggers around.
Can I say every captain?
He's even got a swagger stick, for fuck's sake.
Every captain, apart from Kirk, who is an admiral. Actually, no, every captain then in this is a dick. Because the captain of the Oberth is also a dick.
Captain, yeah.
So it's like every captain in this is just a bit of a dick.
I mean, the captain of the Grissom, feels like he doesn't quite know what he's doing.
You get the impression that he's just got the job and he's like trying to just do everything by the book and impress, and he's like, I'm just going to brown nose my way.
Yeah.
But this guy, I love him, but we'll get to him in a minute because he also says that really dumb thing about how can you have a yellow alert in Space Dock, and I'm like, I could think of like a million reasons how you might have a yellow alert in Space Dock. Like that could absolutely happen. But yeah, so the crew disembark and they're debriefed, and of course they're commended for their performance in what they did with the Genesis device and taking down Khan and whatnot. And I think it starts with Scotty, doesn't it? Scotty's like, he's told, well, I want you to, report tomorrow to Excelsior.
Yeah, he says basically everybody else, everyone get some rest, go and have some sort of,
R&R.
Except for you, Scotty, you're needed on the Excelsior.
Yeah. Yeah, and he says, "Well, I was kind of hoping I'd see the oversee the refit of Enterprise."
Yeah.
And of course the Admiral says that there won't be a refit of Enterprise. I think Kirk questions it, and he says, there won't be a refit. It's 20 years old. It's aging out.
Yeah.
And he also then says, since you've been gone. On your way back, Genesis has become like a massive political nightmare and hot topic. Yeah. So none of you are to discuss this outside of this.
And it feels very much like they were coming home expecting to be sort of, have a, hit, like the kiddie said,
heroes welcome
sort of thing.
Yeah.
And pretty much they've come back and it's like, yeah, well done. No, don't fucking talk about it.
Well done. Everything you did never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a fucking political issue now.
You crashed your ship. That's all that happened. Yeah, yeah. So they're told, that's it.
You can almost see Scotty dying. It's like,
oh god, yeah. We was just slagging off Excelsior. Now he works for
him. Yeah.
So they're back home. No ship. The Enterprise is to be decommissioned. And Scotty's moving off to Excelsior. Everyone else is now left shipless. Now, of course, arguably, Kirk shouldn't have a ship anyway. He's an admiral. Like he should be moving on. But yeah, so they're now shipless apart from Scotty, who's working on a ship that he hates. Meanwhile, Krug and the Klingon crew are looking over the Genesis, or two of them. Two of his senior officers are looking over the Genesis device information, and he asks for an opinion on it. So they're looking at it, and one of them's like, "It's a great weapon, the ability to create or destroy planets is like, it's incredible." And the other guy, the other Klingon is like, "It's amazing, like the to think that they could accomplish such an incredible feat." And he just looks at Kirk just looks at him like,
yeah, it's like, yeah, they could all have new homes and new like things
with
all under the flag of the Federation.
Yeah,
and I love it's the difference. I think it's Torg and Meltz, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Torg is like, yes, it's the weapon. I think Meltz is the that's a really interesting thing. Is like, go and fucking get in your place. Go on,
because Torg's like, hey, we can dominate people with this weapon. He's very much like, yeah, we can use this as a weapon and dominate our enemies.
Yeah.
But the other one is
that's Met the slightly dippy one, is John Larroquette, who was in like some really great stuff. He was in Stripes,
Yeah.
Night Court, and he's a really sort of he's a comedic actor. Then here, he does have the sort of slight I think you do see the sort of like comedy bits in his character. He's the sort of like the only Klingon that seems. I mean, well, there is another Klingon but we'll get to him in a bit. But he's got this sort of slightly. He's clearly the slightly incompetent Klingon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The one that never quite got the aggression that everybody else got.
Yeah. So he tells them not to speak of this, and well, actually, he only tells one of them not to speak of this, but you assume he told the other one later.
I know this. I was going to point this out earlier on when when Valkyris puts the what basically looks like an 8-track
yeah
in the port, and you're like, oh dear, at this point we're still having communication devices that are like the size of a VHS.
It's very Klingon though.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
because you don't feel like Klingons have progressed all that far.
No,
you think they've got enough to get into space, and then after that, all they thought about was weapons. They weren't really thinking about communications. So
I have always found it weird that obviously because they probably didn't want to get to pay the actress, but it is weird that you get the whole Genesis speech with Kirk this time instead of Dr. Marcus.
Yeah, I guess they'd have to pay her royalties or do something. Yeah, she's not even mentioned in this, is she really?
No.
I think does he even mention his mother? I don't think he does.
No,
she's only his father. She's gone now.
They don't mention it, and also I think in this it's David who seems to be the main force.
Yeah, suddenly he was the one that did it all, pretty much.
Yeah, you don't get any impression that
Marcus had anything to do with it. Yeah,
was more instrumental than he was.
Well, yeah, because he later has that admission of how he came up with it, and it's like, oh, okay, because I thought Carol Marcus did most of it, but I guess it was mostly you from the sound of it.
Yeah,
or at least he solved a key problem. I guess you could argue, but Meanwhile, we catch up with the Grissom, which is orbiting the Genesis planet again with a dickhead captain on board. He's talking to Saavik and David, the son of Kirk, who were down on the planet.
You regenerated Saavik.
Yes, she's regenerated.
She's regenerated.
I actually think she does a great job in this.
I do. I think she does a really good job of doing it.
She plays a. Oh no, sorry, they're not on the planet yet, are they? They're discussing. No, they're discussing. They find the life form, don't they? They find like a reading. Yeah. So.
They're reading all the different sort of biomes, aren't they? Each zone's got it's like a tropical zone, and then there's a desert zone.
It's like a Sonic game, yeah.
And then of course they get the tropical zone's temperature's dropping, and it's got snow, which is like the first indication that there's maybe not quite right.
Yeah,
something going wrong maybe here. And I like the sort of the she seems slightly more Vulcan here than Kirstie Alley.
She does. I actually think she plays a Vulcan kind of better in many ways, where she is very logical but not devoid of emotion. Like you can see when they're about to be killed, for example.
Yes,
she's logical, but she clearly has emotion, which is how Vulcans should be. They suppress. They're not void of emotion.
Yeah,
they are very, very suppressed, but it's there, and it should. I always felt like it should be there, bubbling under the surface.
Again, we'll get it when we get to Sarek later on. But I think that there's a number of things that I think certain fans have latched onto and haven't, and I guess I'm one of those as well. That Saavik is half Romulan.
Yeah,
and it's never stated in any of the movies, but in the book it was.
Yeah.
And it was sort of dropped for when Robin Curtis took over. they made her a little more just sort of Vulcan. So I think they kind of made her a little more sort of standard. And also the other thing is, I think in the novelization of this movie, I think it's suggested that David and Saavik are in a relationship now.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I think I don't know whether it's stated or whether it's just sort of suggests.
I certainly don't get that kind of charisma between them in the film, at least. But that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I think there are certain sort of things where you go, which ones do you go with? I guess I guess you're supposed to go with what you see on screen, but that's not what fans do, is it?
No, of course not. Certainly not with Star Trek.
No.
But yeah, so they've detected something, and of course, they're like, well, we need to be absolutely sure. Like this is meant to not have any contamination whatsoever. So we kind of need to discover what this is. So, they're going to head down to the planet and find out what's going on.
And you do get this sort of, especially with this captain. He's got this sort of, Captain Esteban. He's got this sort of feeling like he doesn't really want to be bothered.
Yeah,
it's that sort of like, well, what do you suggest we do? It's like he doesn't seem to have a clue what
you kind of. I get like a Burke from Aliens,
Yeah,
he's like a corporate guy. He doesn't really know anything, but he's just there on behalf of the Federation, and he'll just do whatever his superiors tell him, regardless of the people. He doesn't really care about the crew.
It was like at one point he's like he's a sort of numbers guy.
Yes, exactly.
That at some point they gave the science vessel to, so he's got like a crew full of scientists that he probably
know way better than he does.
Do.
Yeah, absolutely. So meanwhile, the crew of the Enterprise have met for a I guess it might be like it's either a get together or it's kind of a wake for Spock. I kind of feel like or just a farewell drinks, because they may well be ending up separate now.
Yeah.
And
they all end up on different parts
different
of the
ships,
Federation doing different things.
And of course, the door goes. Kirk assumes that it's Scotty, but of course, as he answers, he realizes it's Sarek. He gets that great entrance with the Jedi robes, and, that great reveal. And he says, Kirk, I would speak to you in private. And of course, Kirk at first is just like, oh, I would have come directly to Vulcan. I just had to come back here first, orders and stuff. But Sarek is clearly frustrated, And again, it's that like some emotion.
Yeah.
It's suppressed, but there is emotion there. His son's died. And in their belief system, in there, well, it's not even a belief, it's real in Star Trek, isn't it? They can pass on the katra, the spirit of a body can be passed on through a mind meld. Spock can transfer his katra, his living spirit, and it's his thoughts and everything he's ever learned. He can pass on to someone to then pass on to a Vulcan. It's something that Vulcans practice when the body is near death, assuming it's not like an instant death. If they're dying and they know they're dying and they have the time, they will mind meld.
Yeah.
And Kirk is like, he's completely confused because Sarek's like, why did you leave him there? Why did you leave him there to die? You gave him no hope. You took away his hope. And Kirk's like, I saw no hope. Like, I saw no future. And of course, Sarek says, I need to see your mind. And that's when he realizes that they were separated by the glass in engineering. And he couldn't Spock couldn't physically get to him to mind meld. So
and I guess from Sarek's point of view, it's a case of, well, who else is Spock likely to pass it on to?
You were his best friend. He trusted you.
At one point, as far as Vulcans are concerned, Kirk died for Spock.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't Spock? Why wouldn't Kirk? Why wouldn't Spock pass it to Kirk, his best friend.
Yeah,
It just makes sense, doesn't it?
absolutely, absolutely. But as he mind melds with Kirk, he realizes about the glass, and they relive that moment. There's a great scene between the two as they kind of replay that memory together. And you can see the emotion in Mark Leonard's face as he's kind of he's emoting. He's playing the part of his son effectively, and obviously, of course, Kirk is then playing the part that he played in that scene. And I think it's wonderfully shot. The shot of Kirk's eye, the shots of Sarek's mouth.
Again, this movie has got some of Shatner's best performances as Kirk.
Absolutely, it does. Yes, I completely agree.
I mean, you know, yes, you know, as we've all said, Wrath of Khan is the standard, and you know, you've got the other thing with later to come. But in this one, you get some beautiful moments with Kirk, and one of my favourites, you know, towards the end, which we'll get to. But this one is great, and you always feel, God, how horrible must this be? You're getting over the death of your friend, and here comes this guy who is literally putting you through it again.
Yeah. Well, and also equally, how horrible is it for a father to relive that event with his son, you know? But yeah, it's a horrible thought, and I think both actors play it wonderfully well.
Yeah.
I think it's a really wonderful shot, and then of course, you know, Sarek says, "Well, then my son is truly dead. He's lost forever. All of his spirit and his memories are lost forever." But Kirk says, "Well, he would have found a way." He was like, if it was that important, he would have found a way. And Sarek says, "Oh, I agree, but how?" And so of course Kirk thinks to check the video tape.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how these cameras are set up on the Enterprise, but apparently they pan just like a cinema camera.
Yeah.
I think it would have been really awkward if they'd refilmed the scenes anyway, so I get why they did it. But it is kind of funny because it's like, where are these cameras exactly?
It's always been one of those things for Star Trek, though, hasn't it? Whenever they've done the hey, we're going to recreate what happened, and you literally get, you know, them showing the episode parts or whatever, you know.
It was like kind of solved later on when they were like, it's the holodeck. Is that okay? That's fine now.
Yeah,
you've got the answer now.
When you get to trials on next gen, it makes much more sense because of the holodeck.
Yeah, but you're right. It's kind of always awkward when they use the footage. But of course, we see that as he goes back through, and I love that moment of pain as well when Kirk immediately starts the recording, and it's the bit where he's dying and he's just having those final moments with him, and he's like, no, rewind.
Yeah.
But they get to the part where he sees that Spock did in fact mind meld with McCoy. Now, this was kind of a throwaway thing in the last movie that apparently they threw in. They weren't really sure what they were going to do with, but they were like, well, this does something. Maybe in the next, if we make another movie, we've got something. You know, a hook for another movie.
With Nimoy was a bit weird because, you know, apparently after he saw Wrath of Khan, it kind of re-energized him for Spock.
Well, either that or the pay packet and the
there's that
the popularity of the film. But yes, I believe he probably got a passion again for Spock.
Yeah, and they you know, the company said, would you like to come back as Spock? And he was like, hell yeah, I'd love to come back as Spock, but I want to direct.
Yeah.
And they're like, because I think previous director, my brain's forgetting his name, he didn't want to come back because as far as he was concerned, Spock should have stayed dead. You know, he did that. He wanted him to, you know, stay dead, and that was it. And he didn't want to come back for the next one.
Normally, I would agree. This is a really, really rare situation and can only happen in science fiction, where they just so happened to have all the ingredients necessary to make an amazing plot about resurrection, because they've literally just had a planet that made itself and is birthed out of nothing, and they did shoot him into it, and it's like, you didn't plan for this, but it works so well. It's like you might as well have planned it. It's almost like someone planned it in advance.
And they basically, when the the movie was sort of done, they when Wrath of Khan was done, they were like, okay, now we need to work on the sequel, and they pretty much just started straight away, sort of thing. They were like, yeah, we need to work on this, and it was so quick that sometimes you can feel that maybe there were certain things in this movie that could have been tightened or could have been
maybe give it another year and just kind of work on it a little bit more.
Yeah. But I think they did an amazing job of
I really like it. I think they did a very good job.
As follow-ups go, it's really, despite a few sort of minor things, I think they did an amazing job of quickly turning this around and bringing him back in a satisfying way.
Yeah.
There's so many, especially with things like superhero comics and things like that where heroes die, they bring them back, and there's no stakes. There's no sort of it kind of kills it. But I think this is one of those times where it works really well.
I agree. Yeah. So meanwhile, Saavik and David beam down to Genesis to find this reading, and of course they come across initially what they think is the only life the life form they found, is Spock's torpedo, and the I guess they were like microscopic bacteria when they landed on the planet. They must have survived entry, into the planet. Have now grown, and they're now kind of creatures, bugs, slimy things.
I heard somebody describe them as ravioli
at this stage. Yes. Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah. They David surmises that it must have been the microscopic bacteria, and the planet must have sped up evolution, because they're seeing the planet evolve. So it makes sense that everything else on the planet is also evolving at a rapid rate, including the life that happened to be there. So they open the torpedo and they discover only Spock's robes, and his burial robe's there, but the body isn't. And then of course the whole planet shakes. The planet is still forming. It's still in this kind of prehistoric age.
Yeah.
But they hear a cry in the distance. We then cut back to Kirk asking if he can get the Enterprise back. Basically, he's like, I just need to borrow my ship for a thing.
Take a trip.
And I actually think this admiral or commander, I think he must be an admiral.
Yeah, he's an admiral,
of some kind. I actually think he's really reasoned and fair here, where he says, like, I understand that you've lost your friend, but
Admiral Morrow.
Yeah, but he's like, well, you can't do this. Like, I feel for you, and I feel for Sarek, but this Vulcan mysticism is it's not enough to justify you going back to a restricted top secret planet with a battered ship, and
he's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, and he questions it. He's like, well, what business is it of yours? This to get his spirit and stuff. And I think he's coming from it from the perspective of, like, it's just some superstitious belief that Vulcans have. It's nothing, it's nonsense. But of course Kirk says, it's everything to me. This I have to do this. It's my absolute duty to do this. And he says, look, just give me back the Enterprise with Scotty's help. And he immediately cuts him off, and he's like, no, it's a death trap. It's basically done. It's done. And Kirk even suggests, like, well, I'll hire a freighter or something. And he's like, no, Genesis is off limits. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Not even you are getting in there. It's done. And I do find it kind of interesting, because it's like, well, could you not talk to your son? like he knows his son is working on Genesis, but maybe there's like a communications blackout to where he can't even talk to him.
Yeah, that's probably
because that would have been a bit easier. It's been like, well, while you're there, could you just beam up? You know,
the thing you've got a sort of that doesn't actually make sense though, if you think about it, is this planet, it's off. You know, the Federation have basically put it off limits to everybody.
Yeah.
Right. Why would you just put the Grissom there?
I know. I would have put Excelsior there.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like it would have been.
Really want a couple of Constitution classes floating around this thing just to keep.
Well, as we will see, a single torpedo will fucking ruin the Grissom's day in a bit. So.
Yeah.
But as Kirk leaves the bar, it turns out that the crew of the Enterprise have just been stood there awkwardly waiting outside the door, like kids, you know, when one goes into the head teacher's office. Sorry?
He says, "What's the word?"
He says, "What's the word?" And he says, "The word is no, so I'm going anyway."
Going anyway, yeah.
Uh,
what I like about the all these the crew here, they've all got these sort of like civilian outfits, and you've got Sulu in this sort of like almost Inverness cape.
I love the cape thing.
I think he looks great.
He looks amazing.
For some reason, Sulu's in this sort of weird, like Victorian schoolboy outfit. It's got these like weird round collars, and it looks so weird and like.
It's the future, Matt. It's future clothes.
Everybody else looks fine except for Chekhov, who just looks really odd.
Chekhov does look odd. Yeah, I agree. Meanwhile, McCoy is in one of his local haunts, and the barmaid is kind of, he freaks out the barmaid, who obviously knows what McCoy's like normally.
It's like, I haven't seen you for a while.
She says, "What's your poison?" And he's like, "Why would it's illogical to drink poison?" And she's like, "Oh, okay, like what's up with you today?"
Sure. Yeah, I love this whole sort of this whole thing of a logical McCoy. It's so funny. The sort of
the payoff is so worth it when McCoy gets told. He's like, "You're suffering from a mind melt," and he's like, "Green-blooded." It's like, it's so good.
I love that. He says it's his revenge for all the arguments he lost.
Yeah, that's tremendous. So
and it's so beautiful. That you've got these little sort of things that you just think McCoy would never in a million years say anything remotely like these things.
No.
It's so beautiful and funny.
And it's funny that they made him meet this weirdo in a bar that he frequents. So you get the barmaid who knows McCoy, and it's just like, what the fuck? Like, what's going on? You're ordering like Altair water or something, isn't it? And she's like, water? Like, what are you doing? Yeah, it's great. It's absolutely great. But of course, McCoy is here because he also separately wants to get to Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously Spock is in his brain, and Spock is telling him that he needs to be reunited with his body. So he wants to get to Genesis, and he is speaking to this criminal, I guess, smuggler.
Yeah.
That he wants to get in, and this guy is a gem of a man. I love this. Yeah. This performance is so over the top and brilliant.
He's got this sort of James Hong quality.
Yeah, he kind of does. Yeah,
with and stuff, the way he sort of pronounces things and stuff is like, and he's like tells him welcome, and he's like, I think that's my line, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got these like just enough of.
I love when he says, I want to get into the Mutara system, and he's like, Mutara's restricted. We need lots of permits, and he's like, how can you get a permit to do a illegal thing, you moron?
Exactly.
So that makes no sense at all.
And I like it. you do have this sort of like he's being very very logical, and then
McCoy takes over. Yeah,
and then you get the how can you be deaf with ears like that? And
yeah.
So yeah, that's McCoy.
You get the feeling that when he loses when he loses his temper or his emotions get out of whack, it falls back to McCoy.
Yeah.
But of course, this moron screams the word Genesis when he's told that Genesis is the name of the planet that McCoy wants to head to. And of course this alerts Starfleet security. So Starfleet security come over, and the guy makes that really weird noise, like, and you're kind of like, just like, what are you doing? Just go away. But obviously, you know, they've been tailing him for some time, and they're like, look, you shouldn't be walking around talking about that planet, sir. And they take him to get a long rest, which apparently is they call it the Federation Funny Farm, which I thought was quite funny.
That's so weird, isn't it?
I was like, you really in the future you haven't got past things like that?
Well, that is funny that because my wife was sort of came into the movie halfway through sort of thing. She came in more or less at this point, and she looked at me and she said, "Did he just say Federation Funny Farm?"
Yeah. It always got me as well. I was like, that's weird.
Yeah, that is a bit fucking weird, isn't it? It's a little odd that, you know, it's about that how sort of civilized the Federation is supposed to be, and it does seem obvious. Starfleet security didn't get the memo on this because a number of times, like in a minute with Sulu, you think, yeah, Starfleet security are clearly a bunch of dickheads sometimes, aren't they?
Yeah, well, this is that scene, isn't it, where they go in to get McCoy out of the funny farm.
And we also get that wonderful bit of McCoy trying to do the nerve pinch.
Oh, I love that shot. That's so good.
And the guy just like looking at him is like, "The fuck are you doing?"
Yeah. But yeah, they do head to get McCoy out, and you know, Kirk says, "Oh, I hear he's fruit. Isn't that cake?" As they kind of walk in to get him, and of course the security guard's like, "You've got 2 minutes." These security guys are dicks, considering that
I said,
they all outrank these security guards, you know, and it is like that Napoleon syndrome, isn't it? They've got a little bit of power and it's gone right to their head. These security guards, like, oh, we can boss around an admiral if he comes in here, you know. And of course Kirk comes in and he's got Lexerin. And of course McCoy is like, Lexerin? What are you giving me Lexerin for? And he says, you're suffering from a mind melt, Doctor. And of course that's when he gets the fantastic line. He says, well, it'll make you well enough to travel, you know. And he's like, travel where? And of course, you know, it's like, well. Meanwhile, Sulu says, oh, you know, he comes in and he's like, we need to see Kirk immediately. And one of the security guards go to get him. The other guy, the jock, he's tired and he yawns. And he says, oh, they're keeping you busy. And of course he stands up and he's like, don't get smart, Tiny. And it's like, dude, he probably outranks you. That's not the way to speak to a superior officer. And
not only that, you might be built like a brick shit house. Sulu's gonna kick your ass.
Yeah, you're lucky there's not a fencing sword. He would fuck you right.
So apparently, George Takei didn't like this line. He hated the whole
"Don't call me Tiny."
Don't call me Tiny thing. And apparently, when they were at the premiere, the crowd reaction to this whole scene was like amazing. The crowd reaction was really good.
It's an awesome scene.
Like, and he was like, "Okay, I was wrong. It's good. I'll give. You know, I'll relent on that one. I was wrong on that." It's got. I think is brilliant.
I do too. It's one of the more memorable scenes from the movie. Actually, it certainly stuck with me over the years. And I love how they leave just as security come up the stairs. Like it was a perfectly timed, well orchestrated operation. They timed it down to the second, and Kirk says in the elevator, he's like, "Oh, we're the Kobayashi Maru is set to leave, and we're off to the Promised Land." And McCoy kind of smiles. He's like, "You're taking me to the Promised Land?" And Kirk's like, "Yeah, what are friends for?"
Yeah.
We then cut to, I think, Excelsior, and we see Scott's finishing for the day. This is where we first meet this dickhead of a captain. And he's like, "Oh, I'm looking forward to breaking some of Excelsior's Enterprise's records in the morning."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh yeah, fine, sir." And he gets in the elevator, and it's like, "Pick up which floor, please." Which floor, please? And Scotty's like, "Oh, up your shaft."
Yeah, he goes up your shaft, which is brilliant. And apparently that's Leonard Nimoy's voice.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh, that's good to know. That's cool. Meanwhile, Uhura is with this new cadet, overzealous cadet who is very insulting. He's like, "Oh, don't you find this boring?" And she's like, "Oh no, I like quiet, Lieutenant." And he's like, "Well, maybe that's okay for someone like you who's over the hill." And I love the look that Nichelle Nichols gives him when he says that. It's such a great. It's the look of. It's like, "Sir, you have never been around women before, have you? When they shoot you that look, it's time to shut the fuck up." That is a mistake, sir. But he's like, "Oh, I want, you're over the hill, but I want a surprise." And she's like, "Well, be careful what you wish for."
Yeah.
And of course, as soon as she says that, Admiral Kirk and Bones and Sulu walk in. And she's like, "Step into my parlor, gentlemen." They immediately get on the transporter, and he's like, "That's Admiral Kirk." And she's like, "Yeah."
Yep.
And he's like, but there's no permits, there's no documentation. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And he's like, "Well, what should we do about this?" And she's like, "I'm not going to do anything, but you're going to get in the closet."
Yeah.
And he's like, "What?" And then I love, she says, this always made it into the Star Trek trailer, the like general trailer for Star Trek, whenever they did a like DVD box set or VHS box set. It was always this isn't reality, this is fantasy. That line made it into every single one of them.
Yeah.
It's a funny moment, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll just get in the closet," and obviously goes in.
Like, he's actually listed on the credits as Mr. Adventure.
Oh, that's amazing. I've never noticed that before. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
This bit always confused me as well, because then, so he gets in the closet, and then I think Sulu or someone says, "Are you going to be okay?" And she says, "Oh yeah, I'll have Mr. Adventure eating out the palm of my hand."
Yeah.
And she basically says, "Oh, good luck. I'll see you at the rendezvous."
Yes.
And they're like, "Yep, cool. Glad to have you at our side." And he's like, "Yeah, we'll see you at the rendezvous." And then they leave. Mm-hmm. But then it's really weird, because then Kirk says to everyone else, like, "Oh, we've come this far, but I can do everything else on my own. Me and McCoy need to go, but you guys can stay behind if you want." And of course they go with him, but it's like, but you were going to get Uhura to come with you anyway? It's weird.
Uhura's going to Vulcan, isn't she? She's going to...
Oh, no, you're right. That makes so much more... Yeah, no, you're right. Of course that makes sense. So she was going to meet them in Vulcan. Yeah, no, you're right. Yes. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Well done.
Yeah.
That makes much more sense. So, of course, we find out that well, we'll find out more in a minute, but Scotty has been a busy boy.
Yeah.
And he is programmed. I like that this line is in here, though, because you're like, it doesn't make any sense. The ship needs like hundreds of people to function properly. But Scotty's basically jerry-rigged it. He's jerry-rigged the ship so that it can work with a minimal staff. Mm-hmm. Not going to function very well, but it will function.
Yeah. He's fixed it up so that it can just get from point A to point B. Yeah. That's kind of all they need at this,
Yeah, well, and he does say,
as far as they're aware, that's all they need.
When they get into battle, like, the whole thing shorts out, and he's like, I literally was never expecting us to take this thing into battle. Like, it's barely holding together. But yeah, so they all agree they're coming anyway, and they start to depart space dock. They're immediately told, like, "What are you doing? Do not leave space dock."
Yeah.
And of course, you know, Chekhov's like, we're being told to turn around, and Kirk's like, no reply, continue on. We then get the captain, as I said, in bed, and he's told, like, you know, yellow alert, and he's like, Bridge, how can there be a yellow alert in space dock? And I've always thought, like, there's like a million reasons why there could be a yellow alert in space dock. I mean, to be honest with you, the one thing he has got right, I would have said this was a red alert situation, not a yellow alert. But
I guess red alert's more attacks and
yeah,
things.
I guess so. I mean, theft of a warship, though, it's pretty serious.
I get, yeah, true.
I mean, it is battered. This is not going to do much, but you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
they completely set this captain up to be the biggest douche.
Oh god,
I mean, not only is he lounging on his bed, filing his nails.
I know.
You've got his swagger stick behind him.
Yeah, like he sleeps with his swagger stick.
Yeah, he is just the epitome of dickhead officer.
Now, yeah, he really is. So then he comes out to the bridge eventually, as they're making their way towards the space dock doors, and the helmsman is like, oh, you know, we've got warps ready, transwarp, and all of that, and he's like, an incredible machine. You know, he is like, you get the impression that this is like the pride of the fleet. This thing, and so now he thinks he's just marveled at this thing. He's like, look at us, we are the best, we're the cutting edge.
You know, it's supposed to be. It was supposed to be the transwarp project,
the
wasn't
great
it?
dream,
isn't
it?
New, you know, supposed to be this new thing. It was supposed to be, you know, top of the range. You know, this is going to be the flagship of the Federation. It's going to take over the Enterprise. It's the flagship. It's going to be, you know, all those things. And then it was a complete fucking failure.
Now, does transwarp never happen because of what Scotty does here?
So I think,
or is transwarp just actual normal warp? Because there is that weird thing where like they've had to. There is something in canon now, isn't there, where like TOS warp 5 is not warp 5 in TNG, where they've like adjusted it somehow.
Yeah.
I think in canon they've said that there was some like different scale or something.
At some point, I think transwarp was supposed to be warp 14 or something. It was supposed to be something ridiculous,
right?
And then it got changed so that you can never go past warp 9 point whatever it was. I think,
or you turn into lizards if you go beyond that.
Fudged backwards and forwards at some point, but I think later on, when you get to Voyager,
when they turn into newts,
becomes a thing.
They turn into newts because they go too fast.
Yeah, I think I might be wrong on this. I think the transwarp stuff starts getting more sort of common by the time you get to Voyager, because I think it's to do with the Borg.
Yeah, the Borg have transwarp corridors and stuff.
Yeah. So I think once they get to that, the Federation basically gets hold of the technology.
I mean, that might be a nice retcon, actually, to suggest that, well, they could get into transwarp, you know, back then. But there's no way to anchor it. It's almost like wormholes, isn't it? Because the Borg have got like transwarp conduits that connect areas via transwarp, and it's like, well, maybe that's what was missing, and then when they tried it, they were like, oh, that was a terrible idea. We can't control it yet. We'll put it on the back burner. And of course, the Borg have perfected it with their corridors.
Yeah. But for all intents and purposes, the actual Excelsior experiment was a failure.
Yes, maybe because of Scott.
And I think that it basically got retrofitted so that it just ended up with a normal warp engines in the end.
Yeah, because I mean, it's still the most amazing ship in the fleet, even without transwarp. It's still
exactly.
I mean, they're still using it in DS9.
Yeah,
I mean, in DS9 they use Mirandas as well for some reason, but you know, it still packs a punch in Next Gen.
Well, I always got the impression that with things like the Miranda class and
they're more science than anything.
All those little. My guess is that they're just new versions. They're just easy, cheap.
Yeah.
So they're not old, like they haven't gone all the way through. They're sort of newer versions of what those vessels were.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you still get constitutions turn up in next gen.
Do you?
So I'm pretty sure you get a
Maybe you
constitution.
do. Maybe.
I guess
I
they're
don't
just
remember
newer
seeing a constitution, but yeah, they would be retrofitted. But Excelsior still packs a real punch in, even in next gen. I mean, you get that great episode on Earth, the two-parter when in DS9, when the Defiant goes up against an Excelsior class, and it's upgraded, but it still holds its own. It's still a tough warship.
Yeah.
So it is, it's still the best, even without transwarp. Is the best they can do.
Yeah. Well, at this point, it's still, it's the top of the range. It's the best that they've got.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Everything on it is top notch at the moment.
So
it
as
is
they're
the most advanced ship.
Yeah. So as they're leaving, Kirk's like turns to Scotty and he's like, "Get the space doors." Yeah. Scotty's like, I'm working on it, and they just get closer and closer and closer, and of course eventually it gets in right at the last second, the doors open, and it's a great shot of the Enterprise backing out and turning. Some really nice ship shots in this. Some nice angles you're not used to seeing, and some nice, it's cool.
Yeah, not quite the shipboard levels we got in the motion picture, but
no, but good actiony scenes and shots. You get that great shot of the Enterprise banking around the space dock and stuff, and it's great. But of course Excelsior's hot on its tail, and of course he's like, well, if they try and get away with warp, he's in for a real surprise. He messages Kirk and he says, if you do this, you'll never sit in that chair again. But of course Kirk gives the order anyway, and they head into warp. And then Excelsior, you get the big build up. They got the super chairs that will fold in.
I love that.
Got the armrests out ready. But of course it fails. And you just get the good morning Captain message. And at that point he must have known.
Cloak.
He knows who did that.
And I love that
it all sunk in at that point. I think in that moment he was like, it was fucking Scotty, the bastard.
Yeah. And I love that the first officer is Miguel Ferreira.
I know. It always shocks me every time I rewatch it. I'm like, wow, because he becomes so much bigger than he is here, but it's like, whoa.
It's great. It's like, hey, Mr. Fuck you from RoboCop.
Yeah.
And Twin Peaks, and I love Miguel Ferreira.
He's great. Yeah, he's great. But yeah, so of course, off they go. You get the great line from Scotty when he's like, from one surgeon to another doctor.
Yes,
some souvenirs.
The computer core.
Yeah. And yeah, then he says, McCoy's like, oh, it's nice of you to tell me. And Kirk's like, well, that's what you get for missing staff meetings.
Yeah.
And he says, your performance today has been exemplary. I intend to recommend you all for accommodation in whatever fleet we end up serving.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I think Savick and David have been walking for fucking miles. But they finally catch up with the child that they've been hearing, the cries.
One of the things I love. So there's like 5 or 6 actors that are Spock.
Yeah.
All together over the course of the movie. Do you know who's doing the screams?
No.
It's Frank Welker.
It's what?
Frank Welker.
Really?
Yeah. It's like, wow, you got Frank Welker to do the screams. That's brilliant.
He's got that kind of Megatron-y thing going on.
Which of course makes perfect sense that Frank Welker's being Spock, that much later.
That's true.
Spock will become Galvatron.
Yeah. So Savick is very shocked to discover that this boy has the ears of a Vulcan, and David surmises that it must be it must be Spock, and it must be that Genesis has regenerated Spock. And there's a moment I love in this where Savik's reporting this, saying like, in some way the planet must have brought back Captain Spock, and there's a woman on the bridge who gives this look like, what is going on?
I think she's the helmsman.
Yeah, she's just like, what the fuck?
The look,
it's such a great look.
Just her eyes go wide, and she just slowly revolves towards the captain.
Yeah,
and again, the captain, like, he clearly is way over his head. He has no idea what fucking going on, and he's like, he doesn't make a decision. He says, "What do you suggest we do?"
Yeah,
it's like, dude, you're the captain, for fuck's sake.
Well, and then he asks his science officer, he's like, do you think there's any risk of contamination? And she's like, David doesn't think so. And he's like, well, let's do it by the book and not do that anyway. And it's like, why did you even ask then?
Yeah.
What was the point of even asking your experts if you're not going to listen to your experts? But of course, he says, well, contact Starfleet. And of course, the communications officer goes to contact Starfleet, and then suddenly we're being jammed. We can't get through. And then, of course, disturbance off the starboard bow, and of course it's the Klingons who decloak, and immediately he's like, well, actually he says to the gunner, he's like, target the engines only.
Yep.
But of course it's no berth, so it's made of glass. So he shoots it, and of course the whole thing explodes.
Yeah.
And I love I love Christopher Lloyd's like, I wanted prisoners, and the guy's like, lucky shot. He just blasts him.
This is another one of those things that really does emphasize how the brutality of Klingons.
Yeah,
because he pulls that pistol, and
without thought,
what you get is something unlike a the usual phaser.
It looks really painful.
Thing. You get a bang, and what looks like the most painful death,
because it's really slow.
Yeah, it's really sort of it's a disruptor. It looks like it's completely slowly disintegrating.
It's like it's disintegrating you from the inside out. It's like microwaving you or something,
Yeah,
it looks awful.
And I think it's Torg says that,
sir, and he's like, say the wrong thing.
Yeah, I say the wrong thing. I love that. And he's like, if you want prisoners, there are some people on the surface.
And he said the right thing. Yeah, he was fine.
He's like, yeah, you get to live today.
Yeah. So yeah,
we haven't mentioned Krug's pet.
No, is that a Targ? I'm assuming it's a Targ.
It's not a Targ.
It's not a Targ. I always assumed it was.
Targs are more pig-like.
Right.
So I don't know what it is, but it's a weird fucking puppet.
I love it. It's great.
I love the head.
Yeah.
It always feels like the puppeteers didn't quite have full control of it.
It doesn't look like, it doesn't really move very much, does it? It's very static and just kind
of. And I know it was controlled by somebody actually sitting in the chair under, in the chair and stuff. And so it does, and the head works, but it feels very sort of like static and a little wobbly.
Yeah. Yeah, I like you're right. I like the design, but the puppeteering is not amazing.
Yeah, and I think they wanted it to look sort of as mangy and manky as they possibly could.
They succeeded.
They did. They sort of put go on it to make it look horrible, and it works well enough. I think for a thing, it looks suitably gross and Klingon.
Yeah, you almost want like the like American Werewolf in London werewolf. That's what you want.
Yeah,
that's like mid-transition kind of thing,
Yeah.
But yeah, it does the job. I think it does the job. So Krug and his first officers they beam down to the planet, or his security guards, I guess. They beam down, and this is where he decides to fight the worm.
Yeah,
I love this. They first find the torpedo, and they see these like crazy horrible creatures that have now formed into almost like millipede kind of things, aren't they?
They're more sort of more worm-like and
more worm-like, yeah,
and just way more gross.
And of course, one of them goes. The security guard goes to shoot him, and he's like, "No, I'm gonna take this out with my bare hands."
Yeah, he picks it up and it starts curling around him and strangling him.
Yeah, I did wonder whether the security guards were like, "Oh, promotion."
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
that's what you would think is a Klingon, isn't it? I mean,
well, and also he's meant to die with honor.
Like,
his honor, isn't it?
Go up.
Yeah, and it's his honor. You can't interrupt it. He's going to die with honor. He's going to die with honor.
And I love it. He squeezes it and kills it.
And I love nothing to report.
He takes out his communicator and goes, "That like ship, nothing's happening here."
Yeah. Moving on.
Yeah. Apparently on the voice track, Robin Curtis said that apparently Christopher Lloyd didn't understand the communicator.
Oh, okay.
So apparently he would shout his lines to the sky when he was talking to the ship. And he had to keep getting told, no, you talk into the communicator. You don't shout up to the ship.
That's bizarre.
That is weird, isn't it? I mean, maybe he'd never actually seen Star Trek before. I don't know.
But shouting up to the sky makes even less sense. How does that work?
Yeah, I don't know.
Does he think he can talk to NASA by shouting up into the sky now?
Maybe.
Don't worry, I'm going to talk to people on the ISS up there. Give me a minute. Yeah. So anyway, he murders the worm.
You get that really cool shot as well, so that there's a sort of sound, and then it all goes dark.
Yes, as the sun sets. Yeah, that's amazing.
The sun sets, and you get that beautiful sort of like shadow. They all turn round to face the sunset.
Yeah.
And this beautiful shadow goes over them. And everything sort of goes like hazy and red. It's like, oh, that is beautiful shot.
Really well executed. In terms of direction. It's great.
And it's another sign that clearly this planet's fucking wrong, because that was
that's
quick.
Not normal. Yeah. It's like the sun set like a light bulb turning off. It was like, well.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention as well, we do get briefly before that David saying, God, this is my fault, the Genesis thing, because I added this unstable element that Savick says is like outlawed, is dangerous, and
use proto matter, which like basically everybody is denounced as dangerous and unstable. It's like, well, it was the only way to get it done.
Yeah, and she's like, how many lives does this cost? And it's like, well, the Klingons were going to come for this anyway if it worked, right? Like, he's not responsible for everyone dying on the Grissom. That's not his fault.
No.
And it's like, I've may have saved Spock, so technically I've done good. Bad science, but the outcome is a net positive so far. But yeah, I'd forgotten about that scene, but it's a good scene, and I like when she's like, "And what is yet to come?"
Yeah, and he says, this is his life's work.
Yeah,
and if he hadn't used that, it may never have got worked. May never have worked at all.
You get the impression that Savick's like, it would have been better if it was never.
You goes, yeah, it's probably best that it didn't happen, actually.
Well, I think that is Savick's kind of point, isn't it? Is that I think she sees it as kind of like mad science, and it's probably it's too powerful for certainly for, because you know what the Vulcans are like. She's like, I think it's too. You humans should not have this power. Like, this is a bad idea. Maybe if it was a Vulcan scientist, we could do something.
You'd think a Vulcan scientist wouldn't have made that decision.
No, exactly. They certainly wouldn't have used an unstable element. But yeah, so as you said, the sun sets over Genesis, and you get the shot from David's perspective as well as the night comes over, don't you? It kind of goes over all of them.
Yeah.
And then he's kind of looking up at the night sky, and it's beautiful shots, really, really beautiful shots.
Yeah, yeah. And we get Saavik explaining that Spock's probably going to be going through Pongfire quite soon.
Yeah. Well, this is like the first mention of Pongfire, right? I think. Was it ever mentioned in TOS?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember now.
The Pong time.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. So yeah, she says to David, she's like, "Yeah, this gonna kick off pretty soon. It's kind of, you know, almost his time, because obviously he's aging very quickly along with the planet. He's aging quickly. I think David says that he's aging in surges, isn't it? It's like it's stable for moments and then it's quick, and we see that in Spock where he's okay, and then it's almost like his whole bone structure's changing, and he's just in agony all of a sudden. Where it's like, oh god, you know, there's like this big spurt of growth, and he's.
Yeah, I think they've got the. Where is it? I'm just trying to find it. They've got the sort of the rough years, I think. Yeah, so he sort of the years they've got here are 9, 13, 17, and 25. Which I presume were the ages of the actual actors at the time.
Mm.
That the various stages.
And then Leonard Nimoy.
At the very end, yeah.
Yeah. I always thought in this movie, I'm always like, wow, they took him off the planet at the perfect time, didn't they?
Yeah.
Wow.
It almost feels like, they were just cooking him up.
They were stranded for like one more hour.
Yeah.
Although Vulcans live a long bloody time, so I suppose you could argue that, you know.
Yes, I think 200, I think they can live to.
So I guess once he reached adulthood, they might have screwed up, but it would have been less noticeable for a Vulcan.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, the Enterprise is heading there. They cannot raise the Grissom, so immediately they're a little suspicious. They ask, Kirk has that great moment with Bones where he's like, you know, how are we doing?
Yeah.
And he's like, how are we doing? He's like, well, we're doing fine. But yeah, they're very concerned about
the line as well about he says about having his contra stuff, and he says, was it I'd rather have given him one of my kidneys than have him scramble my
brains. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, we get another shake on the planet, and now Spock is entering the Pongfire. As you said, Saavik knew this was coming, and she's like, it's come, you know, it's here.
And there's, I think here as well, there's another sort of thing that was never really picked up on in later stuff, but was planned, and that is that Saavik would have had Spock's child.
Yeah,
because you don't know how many. Because going by the ages that he jumps, that's a couple of 7 years here. It's Pongfire's every 7 years.
Yeah.
So they probably did it more than once.
Yeah.
They do. I think they do. I think DC Fontana worked out most of the Vulcan stuff, and I think she did say at some point that there is this sort of false idea that Vulcans only mate every 7 years. She said that is a biological imperative.
Yes.
But they can have sex whenever they want.
Yeah.
They do have,
It's not that they don't, it's just that they must during a certain period.
Exactly, yeah, because of the repressed sort of emotions and all that sort of thing. They have to every 7 years. But they can do it whenever they want, if they so desire. They Vulcans do have loving relationships, so
They do have that weird moment here where she does kind of, she's like, oh, do you trust me? And it almost looks like she's going to just do a calming thing with his, because they do that thing with the fingers. But there is definitely at the end, the way she looks at him is like, okay, and it's never mentioned, but the look is there, and it is like, okay.
Yeah.
I guess they were like, if we leave it like this, then
Well, I think
old
there's
school
been
fans can take away what they need to take away
Yeah.
from it, and new fans will just think, oh, it's fine, he got
Yeah.
over it, you know.
Yeah.
They don't say either way, so
No.
it's you know it's kind of accepted. Um,
Although personally, I've always liked the idea that there's a son of Spock out there somewhere.
what just exploded on Genesis?
No. You know,
Because
like,
wouldn't the baby also age, or does that not work that way?
no,
I guess.
Well, he stops ages as soon.
Oh, that's true. As soon as he leaves, but
So yeah.
you'd think it would be she'd be showing by the time she got off Genesis, but I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah.
So of course the Enterprise is entering the system. So Krug immediately tells them to cloak. They're very suspicious that they can't, you know, they can't raise the Grissom. We get that great line here of I think is here where Spock does the scanning.
Yep.
Which I love Chekhov's look. He's like, wow, you know, they're all kind of shocked by this.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I think over the years, I think it's always been that Chekhov is the most superstitious, I think.
Yes.
And you do get that sort of almost like you almost feel that Chekhov is crossing himself at that point. You know, you get that sort of.
So meanwhile, Krug and his lackeys finally catch up with the now I guess now he would be the what 18-year-old Spock, 25-year-old Spock, somewhere around there. And
you do get Sulu does say for a moment he thought he saw a scout ship.
Yeah. Well, they prepare pretty quickly once they figure it out. But yeah, Krug is obviously still down on the planet at the moment, and they catch up, and he's like, oh, you know, I came all this way to find Genesis, and what do I find? You know, a boy, a Vulcan child, and a woman. And yeah, so she says, oh, you know, well, the Savik's like, we're doomed. Doomed explorers. This is a failure. It's a disaster. And of course, Krug's like, this is the best weapon I've ever seen in my life.
Krug is just like, no. He's like, yeah, where you see failure, absolute brilliance. This is just perfect.
Yeah,
you know, just think of the worlds I can destroy with this.
And not only that, I mean, he's right. I mean, can you imagine if he went back to the Klingon Empire with this weapon and was like, look what I've got? Like, they'd be like, yeah, you're instant promotion. You're we love you.
Emperor Krug is
yeah. So of course the Enterprise is still trying to raise the Grissom at this point. They're still not sure. And as you said, Sulu does say, like, hey, I thought I saw something. I don't know.
Yeah, Kirk says, do you think it was the Grissom? Do you think it could have been the Grissom?
Well, of course, I always assumed it was because Krug now heads up.
Yeah.
And I think it must, because later we discover they can only do certain things while cloaked. And they have to decloak to beam up, decloak to shoot. Well, I always assumed you could say here that that's when Sulu got that blip, was like, oh, he beamed up and it kind of blipped briefly.
Maybe.
But of course, Krug's like, oh, wow, we can take out a Constitution. This would be good. This would be great for us. And of course, obviously, he wants to keep the secrets of Genesis. He's also heard Kirk's voice at this stage, so he knows Kirk's like the Genesis man as far as he's concerned, because Carol Marcus never existed.
Yeah, she's been taken out of the equation.
Yeah. So of course, they head into firing range. And start transferring energy to weapons and all of that. It's all very submarine-y, as Wrath of Khan kind of dictated the space warfare will be in Star Trek going forward. But of course, you know, they're Kirk and Sulu are watching the stars, aren't they? They're looking for distortion.
They can see the distortion.
And of course, they see just in time to raise the shields and prepare.
You don't raise the shields. They do not raise the shields.
I thought they... Oh, no, they just fire, don't they?
Yeah.
They just fire first.
Yeah.
And doesn't he say to the... He says I love Krug says to one of the crewmen, he's like, we're not blowing this one up. Like,
Yeah.
you make sure this time.
Yeah, engines only.
You saw what happened to the last guy, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a really well directed scene where you're going between the two bridges. And of course Kirk gets there first, and that he knows his expertise with the Klingons and Klingon technologies. Like, they need to decloak to fire. That's when they're most vulnerable. If we haven't got shields, well, they won't have shields either at that moment. So that's the perfect time to strike. And of course, Krug gives the order to fire. The bird of prey decloaks, and they immediately, the Enterprise fires, and it's like a couple of torpedoes, isn't it? That hits the ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kills his dog.
Yeah, it kills his dog.
Fluffy gets killed.
I mean, he gets his revenge pretty soon. He kills his child in a minute. So
it's true.
Well,
and they're sort of a little sort of stunned. They're like, why haven't they finished us off? Why aren't we dead?
Yeah, at first he's like, get emergency power, what are we doing? But then he's like, afterwards he's like, why are we still alive? Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
And I think he says that the Enterprise outguns them something like 8-1 or something.
Yeah, well, it's a Constitution class, right? It's it's crazy. But of course they manage to get a shot off, don't they? They managed to get a single shot off, and it basically just fucks everything on the ship. Yeah, they were like, well...
He says he just raised the shields, and Scotty's like, I can.
Yeah. And then he goes to do something else, and the whole console just kind of...
Just blows up, basically. Yeah. That's it. All fucked.
Yeah.
And as he says, we've said earlier on, he says, I wasn't planning on going into combat. The ship's barely holding together. It was supposed to get us from, there to here. It wasn't supposed to fight anybody.
Yeah. And this is a nice callback again to Wrath of Khan, where, Kirk is banking on, as he did with Khan, he's banking on the Klingons not knowing the damage that's been done to the Enterprise. That he can bluff his way out of it and just be like, we're calling for a truce. We're not necessarily as damaged as you think we are. We're telling you to stand down as captain of the Enterprise. I'm telling you to stand down. But of course, Krug is like, something's up here. We were dead to rights, and there's no way that Captain Kirk wouldn't have taken the opportunity to blow us up. So, Kirk's kind of threats of like, you have 2 minutes to surrender or whatever is like, no, I don't think so. And of course, his second in command, Krug's second in command is kind of like, how do you know? And Krug's like, I know my instincts. Yeah. I know my gut instinct is that we've got them. We got them dead to rights. And then he kind of goes on this spiel of like, how the Federation have created this weapon in secret, and you've got this deadly weapon, and I'm here to take it. And he says, look, I've got 3 prisoners on the planet below, from the program that developed this doomsday weapon, and if you don't surrender, we're going to kill them one at a time, basically.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like saying, it's for galactic peace and stuff, doesn't he? He's like trying to make out like it's for the greater good that they get this device.
Yeah.
Of course,
they all get to sort of speak. They get to speak to.
Well, Kirk asks, doesn't he? He's like, I want to speak to them, and he's like, yeah, I'll let you speak. And of course, Kirk is immediately, as soon as he hears from Saavik, he's like, is David there?
Yeah.
And so, of course, briefly, he's like, oh, my son's alive. And Saavik says, well, there's a Vulcan science officer here that you know very well.
Yeah.
And she says, he's not himself, but he does live. And, of course, they now know, well, we have his spirit as well. We've got his spirit and his body now. They're separate, but yeah, and Kirk has, kind of a touching brief reunion over the communicator with his son. He says, I'm sorry I'm late, and he says, what went wrong? And David says, look, I went wrong.
Yeah.
I completely fucked this, to be honest with you. But he says, do not hand over the Genesis weapon. He's like, don't give it over.
Yeah. we actually forgot a line from Savak as well when David says about the proto matter and how he like basically cut corners. Savak says, "Wow, you are like your father."
Yeah, she does. She says you're reckless like your father. Yeah. And then we get this great scene where it's like, kill one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't care who. And you get the Klingon walking behind them with the knife.
Another first as well. First time we see that knife.
Yeah, which will be, I mean, it's like a staple in any Klingon episode.
Klingon has one, don't they? Really?
Yeah. Yeah, because not every Klingon has a bat'leth. Every Klingon has that dagger.
Yeah.
It's a cool dagger as well with the bits that go out. I like it.
Brilliant.
So again, we get that great little hint of emotion in Savik's face, in her eyes as this Klingon officer is walking behind them. But David,
it's a nice build up actually.
It's wonderful. I think it's really good. It's a really tense scene.
You've got the Klingon with the knife sort of going behind them and sort of like just choosing which one to kill, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And he clearly chooses Savak.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. And David's the one that kind of tackles him to the ground. And after a struggle, of course, David is killed.
Yeah.
And
Savak, I actually like the fact that, although he charges him and he tackles the Klingon. The Klingon makes pretty short work of him.
As you would expect he would. I mean, David's a scientist and, he's not Kirk. Kirk is both a scientist and a warrior. Or he's a captain of a science vessel, but he's much more warrior than scientist. But yeah, the Klingon obviously has trained all of his life for this, so immediately kills him. Savik very matter-of-factly, very Vulcanly says, Captain David's dead.
Yeah.
Great performance by Shatner as he falls back into his chair.
Yeah. It is. It's wonderful.
Like you said earlier, some of his best performances as Kirk are in this film. Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right.
And apparently, Nimoy directing him said, do what you think, how you feel he should be. And he says he said he never knew whether Shatner missed the chair on purpose or whether it was
it works so well though.
Accident.
Yeah.
He said either way it doesn't matter. It was a brilliant performance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. And he says, you Klingon bastards killed my son.
Yeah. And so apparently there was much discussion of which person to kill off, and they decided to kill David because of the proto, the unstable matter thing.
Yeah, yeah.
They thought, it was kind of like fitting punishment for his sins, as it were.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that works.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, Kirk is overwrought with emotion over the loss of his son. Krug says, we're going to kill the rest of them unless you surrender. So of course he says, Kirk says, well, yeah, fine, we surrender then. And he says, I need time, I need a minute to get my crew prepared. And he says, I will give you 2 minutes. 2 minutes for your gallant crew. And he tells his first officer, he's like, heavily armed, send everyone we've got.
Yeah.
And we already established earlier, we should have said
he's from his point of view, he's overjoyed. He gets not at this point. He's thinking, right, we get the Enterprise with we get a full
Genesis,
full-on battleship,
and all the information we need.
Yeah, we get Genesis. He's at the moment thinking it's hands down, full win for him.
Well, he says he even says we'll transfer our flag over there.
Yeah,
he's like, that will be our ship now.
Yeah,
it's not like, we're just going to get the Genesis info. He's like,
no,
this is going to be our flagship now.
Yep.
The Enterprise. I mean, what a prize to take! Again, another prize to take back to the Klingon Empire. It's like, I've got the bloody Enterprise.
Imagine the kudos you get
for bringing back Genesis, the most powerful weapon ever, and the Enterprise. Yeah.
Like I said, Emperor Krug.
Yeah, I reckon he'd be up there, wouldn't he? He'd be assassinated for sure.
At least Chancellor, anyway.
Yeah. And yeah, he says, send a heavily armed boarding party. And of course, we should say it was said briefly, I think, by Sulu earlier.
Kirk asks him what the complement of the ship is.
Yeah, and he says that there's not many, basically.
Yeah,
it's
dozen officers and crew.
Yeah. So they're basically sending everyone they've got, for the most part, over to the Enterprise. And so, of course, Kirk says, everybody down to the planet, but I need you three, us three, Chekhov and Scotty.
Right.
We've got some business to attend to. I love the look on their faces when he says about when he starts initiating the self-destruct. Because Scotty, this is Scotty's, again, it's his baby, but you have that moment and then Scotty understands.
Yeah.
And Chekhov, he kind of almost delays as he puts it in, but he's like, yeah, okay, this has to be done.
Yeah.
And yeah, so he
and it's the same destruct sequence from the original series as well.
Yes, yeah, it is, yeah. But yeah, so they put it in, and then of course they beam, because he says to the to Krug, he's like, right, we're ready now. We're gonna initiate beaming. And of course, they beam off as the Klingons beam in.
Mm-hmm.
So the Klingons beam in, and the ship's completely empty, and it's at red alert. Everything's bathed in red, and they walk up to the bridge, and his first officer is like, "There's no one here. They've ran away." And Krug's like, "They must be hiding somewhere." And he's like, "But even the bridge is empty. There's just a computer talking to us."
Yeah.
And he's like, "A computer?" He's like, "Let me hear it." And he puts the communicator up to it, and he's like, "Ah, shit."
He just, get out of there. It's like, yeah, how are they going to get out of there? You're the only one who's probably, at this point, you're the only one who's going to be able to get them out of there, and you're sat in the captain's chair. Those guys are going nowhere.
Actually, it's your job to get them out of there. Run over and make the transporter work, because that's the only way they're going to get out of there. But yeah, and of course the ship that's been with this crew since the very start of the series, since before this crew, actually, some of them, since Pike, is finally destroyed, and it's become so commonplace for ships to get destroyed in Star Trek, especially movies. They've a couple of times it's been either destroyed or threat of destruction, or this was really shocking.
Yes,
it's like, holy shit, because this is the ship that's been with us forever.
This is I think this is the full on emotional.
Yeah.
And
the shot of it going through the sky as well when it comes in.
It's beautiful, and I like one of my favourite shots is the upper hull as it's dipping forward. The ship's dipping forward, and you get that beautiful shot of the outer skin melting as the fires from below the decks are burning through the hull.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful shot of this.
Yeah.
Of this destroying this dying ship.
And we get my favorite line.
Yeah.
Of the movie.
It's one of my favorite lines of Star Trek.
Yeah, the McCoy's line.
Well, both just
with the "My God, what have I done?" But McCoy's
says, "My God, Bones, what have I done?" And he says, "What you had to do, what you always do, turn death into a fighting chance to live."
Such a good line.
Such
a good line, and it's such a wonderful moment, because for these people, this is, like you said, it's been their home forever.
Yeah, it's part of them. It's their home, and you got it's
Scotty looks horrified.
Of them looking up, and you just see it, and the ship entering the atmosphere in this great big ball of fire.
And even as the other actors, they start getting about business now. The rest of the crew. Scotty is still looking horrified in the background. He's just like, oh God, like my life's work is just gone. You know, he's just disgusted and horrified by the whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the planet, or nearby, I guess, we Spock has another transformation as the planet shakes again, and he screams, which of course alerts Kirk and co. They hear it, and head over towards them. The Klingons don't know what the hell's going on with Spock. And one of them gets like, Spock's got like superpower here. He like throws one of them because the Klingon comes up and grabs him, and he just like slings him across.
I think
Vulcans are strong, right? They're strong.
Are of a similar strength, I think.
Yeah. We get I think a reasonably good shot of the deforming face. It's not amazing.
I like it. I
but
think
it's fine, right?
It holds up relatively well.
Yeah.
It certainly looks enough like Nimoy coming through.
Yeah, it's enough to hint at it, isn't it? Of course, Kirk turns up just in the nick of time, shoots the remaining Klingon.
That stun setting is like, what the hell stun setting is that? That Klingon goes fucking miles.
Yeah, it's like stun with authority.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, we stunned him. I mean, he broke his neck on the rocks behind, but he was stunned briefly.
We put it on 10-ton hammer setting.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, it won't disintegrate him, but he'll wish he was disintegrated.
Yeah, he's not walking again.
And then of course, you know, Kirk comes across David, and he puts his jacket over David. Yeah,
I like again,
and the reaction from the crew as well.
Yeah. It's lovely little sort of, you know, they're not doing an awful lot in this movie,
but they need to.
Their reactions are so wonderful. You've got them all. They're all sort of, you know, they're all hunched down and they're just watching as he goes over and he takes his jacket off and puts it over David, and it's lovely. It really
is. It really is lovely.
Beautiful bit of directing, you know.
Yes, wonderful.
Nimoy's a great director.
I was going to say he is a tremendous director, and that really shows here.
Mm-hmm.
We also get another favorite line of mine from McCoy, where he's like, "Oh, you know, Spock's rapidly aging, but his mind is empty," and he's like, "It seems that I've got all of his marbles."
Yeah.
And of course, you know, Kirk's like, you know, is there anything we can do? And Savik's like, well, why don't we just get the fuck off this planet? You know, let's do that first, because the planet is literally tearing itself apart around us. Should we do that first? You know, but of course, I don't know if Savik saw the Enterprise come down, but it's like, well, getting off the planet is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Luckily, of course, Kirk sees the communicator, doesn't he, in the dust, and he picks it up. And lovely callback again to Wrath of Khan. He's going to goad his enemy because he's helpless, but he's going to goad his enemy into making a mistake. And he says, "Hey, I've got your." He's like, "Oh well, sorry about your crewman. Accidents happen."
Yeah.
But I've got everything you want.
You get that shot of Krug,
head in hands.
Head in hands.
Yeah.
On that kind of thing, and I can't remember who said it, but somebody said he's not in mourning for his crew.
No.
He's thinking of the humiliation.
Yeah, he's thinking, oh my god, I had everything and now I'm going to look like a moron.
He's now just his career is over. He's done.
And I mean, really, is there anything more shameful than your entire crew dying but you living as a Klingon captain? Like, yeah, doesn't look good.
No.
So of course he goads Krug into coming down personally, and Krug does indeed beam down, phaser pointed, and he tells everyone to get out of the way, and he wants Kirk to one side. And Krug basically goes to send the crew up, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And Kirk says, "Take the Vulcan too," and he's like, "No." And he's like, "Why not?" And he's like, "Because you wish it."
Yeah.
No, because you want him to go, he's staying here. Everyone else can go. So of course everyone else gets beamed up. And you know, and he says, well, you know, if give me Genesis or I'll kill the Vulcan. Basically, he's like, well,
Yep.
you know, I want Genesis, and if you don't give it to me, I'm gonna kill the Vulcan. And he, you know, he even says, well, you know, he's like, look, you give me Genesis, and I'll consider beaming him up. And Kirk's like, hey, this whole planet is tearing itself apart, and Krug, very Klingon, Krug's like, yes, exhilarating, isn't it? It's great.
Yeah.
But the ground kind of raises, doesn't it, and kind of pushes Krug up into the air.
Yeah.
And that obviously starts the kind of battle between them. I love the shot of Krug when he's strangling Kirk, and he's just like, "Give me Genesis."
Yeah.
But they have
what I like about this is it feels like
an old school TOS fight.
Yeah, it feels like an original episode fight. This,
really
doesn't it?
does.
It's very
because Kirk does the double fist as well. You know.
Yeah.
He starts doing the double fist fighting. He picks up a branch or something as well, and it's all very TOS fight.
Yeah, it's great.
Now I've always thought, you know, they fight to this kind of precipice, don't they? And eventually Krug ends up kind of hanging off the edge.
Yeah.
And I always thought this line felt really awkward to me. They're like, I have had enough of you. It's like, I don't know what he would have said instead of it, but it always kind of makes me chuckle. It always feels kind of a bit awkward.
It does, but I've always loved it.
I love it, but it does feel awkward.
Do you know you know, bearing in mind this was before the movies, so
yeah.
But the whole them fighting over this thing always made me think of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
It's always made me think of Frodo and Gollum in Mount Doom, fighting over the ring. Always made me think of that when he goes over, and he does end up in the lava, you know, very much like
because of his obsession,
Gollum.
Like Gollum. Yeah. I had never thought about that, but yeah, there are absolutely some parallels there for sure. So yeah, and of course, you know, Kirk's now on his own, the planet blowing up around him.
He is with Spock.
Oh, sorry, yeah, with Spock. Yeah, of course he's with Spock. And you get that great shot of the sun rising over the lava.
Yeah.
There's some really great shots and great matte paintings and stuff in this.
Yeah, there's some really beautiful like skies and just natural world shots of this planet pulling itself apart. It's really well done.
Yeah. And finally Kirk approaches Spock and we see as he goes to turn him over that it is now Leonard Nimoy. And of course Kirk has that kind of look of surprise on his face when he's like, oh my goodness, you know, it is my friend, you know.
Yeah.
And of course he grabs Spock and he basically says, like, beam us up. He thinks doesn't he think he's talking to he's talking to a Klingon at this point. He's like, yeah, beam us up, you know.
Well, he is talking to a Klingon.
Yeah, but he probably like presumably doesn't know that the crew are in charge and have taken over.
They're not at this point.
Are they not? I thought they already had by the time they got out there.
He's still in. Who is it? I can't remember what the. It's the slightly dippy officer played by. John
Yeah. It's there. Of course, he comes on the bridge with the phaser, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. So he says the Machui Chu, is it, or whatever it is the Klingon beam me up thing, and I've always thought he shouts it kind of like
Christopher Lloyd
does.
Yeah.
So he gets beamed up, he's ready, and he wasn't expecting to see Kirk, so
yeah,
he's taken unawares, as it were.
Yeah, and he says, like, you know, what does he say to it? He says, like, you know, do you want to die now or go to the brig? And he's like, I don't deserve to live. And he's like, fine, I'll kill you later.
I'll kill you later.
And then of course you get the thing where they're all trying to figure out what the drive is.
Yeah, where's this? I don't know. Maybe it's that. It might be that.
And of course Scotty knows. He's like, it's that or nothing.
It's gotta be that. Yeah. I think it's the main transducer or something. I think.
Yeah. And as they head away, the the planet destroys itself. You do get that great shot of Kirk as he says, goodbye, David. He has that moment of like closure, like he's gone. Meanwhile, of course, they then go to warp and head to Vulcan. McCoy has that great point when he's talking to Spock, the lifeless, kind of mindless, I should say.
Yeah, the husk that is in his body.
And he's like, speak to me, help me, damn it. It's a great shot. And again, it's like these actors are just so good. DeForest Kelley is just amazing in these scenes,
Yeah.
He's just got emotion all over his face, so good. And he says, I've got to tell you something I never thought I'd hear myself say, but he's like, I've missed you.
Yeah.
He tells because of course you know that McCoy loved Spock. He always loved Spock.
Yeah,
he always put on the pretense that he hated Spock. It was always the thing, but you knew they loved each other, really.
Yeah, of course. That's always been their beautiful dynamic. Is that they're the opposites of each other. It's McCoy's always he's the passion and the the humanity, and Spock is the logical discipline. the highbrow thought.
And of course, McCoy being the Doctor is full of passion and compassion, and he sees Spock is heartless when Spock isn't heartless. He just is more logical and more reserved, and it's great. But I love that scene where he confesses that he misses him. He misses his friend. And of course we see Sarek, look out, is the bird of prey comes over. Presumably they communicated that they're arriving in a fucking bird of prey, and not to just panic when this Klingon bird of prey.
It's us. It's not the Klingon.
Great shot though of the bird of prey coming into land. You get that shot over Vulcan. Again, wonderful matte paintings.
I mean, the bird of prey is just one of my favorite ship designs. Anyway, it's such an awesome ship.
When I first saw this ship, I was like, this is the best enemy alien ship in Star Trek. And I felt that until the Romulan Warbird came along.
The D-Deridex, yeah.
I love that ship.
That's I absolutely adore the D-Deridex. It's such a
wonderful
cool ship.
One of my favorite designs. But the bird of prey is a damn close second. It's beautiful.
As a person who loves ships, Star Trek has got some absolute fucking doozies.
Well, for me, and I have said this many a time, the Enterprise refit, that refit Constitution is probably my favorite starship design ever.
Yeah,
ever. I think it's beautiful.
I love the Excelsior. I've always loved the Excelsior. When
I like it. It's not that I dislike it. I like it more than a lot of Federation ships, but that Constitution refit.
Yeah. Oh, it's stunning.
Oh,
absolutely beautiful.
So good. And I love the original, of course, but the refit just has those lines, just those lines and that silhouette and everything about it is just, it's brilliant.
Yeah. And I do love the I've always liked especially in this one. I'm not sure you see it so much in later sort of variations, if you like. I love the way that the engines flicker like they're burning.
Yes, yeah, and they're purple as well, aren't they, on the inside, which you don't very often see. It's kind of a weird thing that happened while filming it, I think, but they're actually purple. And in certain shots, you can kind of see there's purple on the inside of them, but
it looks more like these sort of yellow and orange, isn't it? For the sort of flames, I guess. But I think you're right. I think there is a sort of purpleness to it.
I think there is meant to be, but it's because you see it sometimes in some of the models. But I think it was the way they shot it or something that meant that it didn't quite come out. But it's a wonderful design. It really is beautiful.
Yeah.
So in any case, they make it to Vulcan, and they manage to reunite Spock with his mind. I love when I'm not sure who it is, the female Vulcan. She says,
the High Priestess.
Sorry?
The High Priestess.
Yeah, the High Priestess. She says to
Judith Anderson.
Savick, she says, or to Sarek, sorry, she says, this is, this is all about logic and whatnot, and Sarek says, my logic is uncertain when it comes to my son.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, that's such a good line. It's such a good line.
I think that's initially, I think, not when I was a kid when I watched it, but later on when you watch this movie, you know more about sort of Vulcans and things. And I think initially when Sarek is on Earth and he's talking to Kirk, and he's saying about, he sounds very irrational in
he does, yeah.
his demands of Kirk. He's very irrational. And then in this moment, that line completely explains all of that.
Yes, it explains everything away. It's great.
It's a wonderful little, almost like a throwaway line. It feels like
it's the delivery and everything though. It's just perfect. It's the bow on that thing. It's great. And it kind of reminds me of that wonderful. It's called Sarek, isn't it? The TNG episode when
when he melds with Picard.
Melds with Picard. And you see what's become of him in his old age, and he's got this kind of dementia of a sort, and he can't control his emotions anymore. And wonderful performances.
Says to Picard that Vulcans, they have all these emotions.
They're like the most passionate,
and they're even more heightened in Vulcans when they're unleashed. And he says you might not be able to
control it. You might not be able to control our emotions, because we're like all rage and we're all emotion. We just suppress it. In many ways, you think the Romulans have probably got it right.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
Yeah.
Like, repressing it's probably a bad idea.
I personally, I love the Romulans. I've always been
I do too. As characters, I think.
It's always annoyed me that the Romulans have always got a bit of a raw deal when they're always that race that could have, they're the could have been race. Even with this one, it's like, this is what they could have got this starring role in this movie, but they didn't. And they could have got this part, but they didn't.
Next gen though, they definitely got to shine. Unfortunately, it felt like you were just about to get them to really shine, and then the Borg came along, and it was like, oh, it's all about the Borg now. And
I think even with things like Enterprise, they were gonna get their moment in Enterprise, and then it got
the Romulan War
cancelled.
Yeah.
It's fucking cancelled, and they don't get their moment there, and they get some great stuff in DS9. You get some really good.
I love when they form the alliance, and that episode when
it's a thing.
Yeah, what a great episode.
That is one of the best episodes of
I mean, Sisko's monologue at the end of that is like, would I do it again, and all of that. Oh, so good.
Yeah,
so good. But anyway, they put Spock's marbles back.
Yeah,
and
I love the interaction with the High Priestess after that. And she says, "Who holds his katra?" And McCoy's like, me, McCoy, son of David. I like the way he does that as well. It's just like it's like McCoy feels the weight of the thing and introduces himself like in the most respectful manner he could possibly do it.
Yeah.
And she says that what you asked to be done hasn't been done in centuries.
Yeah.
And it's very dangerous. You could die here. This. And McCoy's like, well,
and especially because you're not even Vulcan.
I think they all have that moment. They all look at McCoy and they all sort of think, well, maybe he won't do it. maybe it's too much to ask him. And McCoy's like, no, of course I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And you almost feel all their relief. It's like, oh no, you made the right decision, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And have you ever noticed as well that when they're taking the Spock's body up to the platform, have you ever noticed that the handmaidens aren't carrying it?
I hadn't noticed that.
Their hands are above it. They're not
right.
carrying it.
Okay.
Which again brings the Vulcans have always had that weird position in what is essentially a very scientific program.
Like a mystic kind of side.
They have that. They have the telepathy and with this, it seems they have telekinesis as well. So
yeah,
they've always had that the highly mystical element to them.
Yeah, I love after Spock's been reunited with his mind and they're getting him ready and prepared and upright. I love the dialogue between Sarek and Kirk when Sarek says, he basically thanks him. And he says, I did what I had to do. And he said, yeah, but at what cost? Your ship, your son. And Kirk says, if I hadn't done this, it would have cost me my soul.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, so good. There's so many good lines in this movie, honestly. So many amazing lines. And of course, he finally meets his friend again. Sees Spock as Spock's kind of brought down.
Well, I like the initial thing because he
just walks past.
He's got the robes and he's with those two sort of monks, or I think they are, and they're all sort of waiting for him. They're all waiting for some sort of response, and at first he just walks past them all.
Yeah, but then he pauses.
There's like a something, clicks and he stops.
Yeah.
And he sort of, he turns around, and it almost feels like he's going through all these things. It's like clear, like the logic stuff is first to come up.
Yeah.
It's like the base Vulcan is sort of hit him, and now he's trying to figure out why these people will have done what they did. His father's told them what they did, what's happened, how he's got back, and you do feel that sort of what am I to these people? Why have they done this?
Yeah.
Because what's happened isn't logical. It doesn't make sense to him at first. The Vulcan brain is there first to
the logic is there first, and then everything else kind of follows.
Mm-hmm.
And you get that great shot when he looks at each of the crew as well as he walks past, and Savick definitely gives him the look of like maybe they did. Maybe they did. But yeah, you're absolutely right. He's like, why would you do this? He says because the needs of the one outweighed the needs of the many.
Yeah.
Which is again a great reflection on Wrath of Khan, and obviously the immortal line that Spock has spoken. And
you can see him weighing up this comment. It just doesn't make sense to him.
No, it makes no sense to him. In fact, he starts walking away. He's almost like rejecting it outright. His body's rejecting this logic. But then he kind of turns back, and that human side of him comes in, that half human. And he says, he says that I have been and always shall be your friend. And he says, Kirk's like Spock. And he just keeps repeating his final moments, doesn't he? He's like, it's the ship out of danger and everything. It's just such a wonderful, again, the character performances in this are superb. And I love when he approaches Kirk after this, and he's like, Jim.
Yeah,
it's your name is Jim, and then you get the music come in, and it's like, oh yeah, he's back, or he's gonna be back, and you get that wonderful smile.
Mention the music,
stunning.
Again, James Horner, doing more with what he did in the previous movie, and I think there are some beautiful swells and things in this movie, and another beautiful moment, just accentuated by his score. Wonderful.
It's absolutely incredible. And we've said before about Star Trek V's it's not a great Star Trek, right? But the things it really excels at are some of the things that this film excels at and almost lays the foundations for. McCoy with his father in 5.
But it's my favorite McCoy moment.
Yes, ever. ever. And you get it here where he says, "I'm son of David," and then of course in 5 we get that payoff where he's like, "Oh, you know, that's what his father meant to him," and that's you know, that emotion in that moment. And you know, there are some great character moments in 5, and watching 3, I'm like, I am almost like, oh, for all of 5's problems, I am reminded of some great character moments of 5 that I kind of almost see as reflections of stuff here, you know.
I think I think that's the thing that you see in this movie and in 4.
Yeah.
Is you see a group of actors who are very aware of what their characters are.
Oh yeah, they know their roles inside and out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They
embody that role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and which is why I've always found it hard to think of anybody else playing those characters. It's why for me,
I've never liked the idea of recasting those characters.
No,
never. I just don't think it needs to be done. Just keep moving forward. I always thought Next Generation was such a genius idea to me.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I know a lot of people hate. I was too young, obviously, to hate Next Gen when it started. But I know there was a lot of negativity around the casting and, oh god, you can't replace these guys. But for me, like, when I look back on it, and obviously I was older when I started thinking about these things, and you know, it was already around. It wasn't like a, you know, but to me it's like, what a genius move. Just move forward. And it's the mistake that modern Trek's made. It's like, why do you keep going back?
Yeah,
just go forward. Do the next generation. Move it on another generation.
From my perspective, you know, when Next Gen started, it was a case of you're gonna I was always gonna compare those characters to the original crew,
of course, and season 1 doesn't help that because does,
because you do get that sort of thing where you get Data and you go, okay, that's just Spock.
Yeah,
you get you know, Riker, okay, that's
basically
really
Kirk. Yeah,
you know, you've got, you know, all these you know, characters that you can see reflected in the things, and thankfully they all went on to become their own thing. They were given enough time and space over the years to develop those characters to become way more than just, you know,
just the new Spock, the new
exactly. Yeah. Data became so much more than Spock. He became...
Well, and Data grew. That's the best thing about Data in that show. Mm-hmm. Like he grew and you know, he became he wanted to be human. And there's that great moment again, wonderful scene between Data and Spock.
Mm-hmm.
When they have that conversation in Unification, when you know, Data's like, oh, you know, I'm striving to become more human, and Spock's like, that's curious because that's literally the opposite of what I've tried to do my whole life. You know, I'm trying to. I chose the Vulcan way. You know, he's like, I chose the Vulcan way, and of course, Data strives to be everything that he pushed away, or almost pushed away.
Theoretically, Data would make the perfect Vulcan. He's got the capacity.
I think he says that. Doesn't Spock say that?
Yeah.
At some point. Or a Vulcan. I don't know if it's Spock or a Vulcan definitely says at some point during the show.
Yeah.
You are literally everything that Vulcans strive to be.
Mm-hmm.
You are that, you know. If Vulcans would admit to having envy, like you're the thing they would envy, you know. But yeah, I've always thought Star Trek 3 is great, and rewatching it, I was like, no, do you know what? This movie is really, really good, and it's a great sequel to Wrath of Khan. It pays off a lot of Wrath of Khan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because there's moments in Wrath of Khan when you think, oh god, the ship's going to be blown up, or you know, they don't do it, and then here they do. You know, and you know, the stuff with David's son. The biggest disconnect for sure is Carol Marcus just disappearing.
Yeah,
I felt like they should have mentioned her at least, and then it would have been okay. But it's almost weirder that they don't even acknowledge her.
Yeah, it is very odd. I mean, I don't know whether it was a money issue or whether they just didn't want to, you know, think. But they could have. I'm sure it wouldn't have cost them that much money to just have a little scene with her, or you know, just mention her, or it does feel very weird.
It does, and to me, I think the movie could have worked really well if Kirk was still with her. They'd got together now, and she was like, we need to get our son back. You need to get our son back. Like.
Yeah, that would have been interesting.
Or something. I don't know.
I mean, the problem is I think because of the turnover sort of thing, is there isn't much time between.
No.
Is there?
Well, she presumably just had another film to do. Probably she just probably had other commitments.
Yeah, that's true.
But it does kind of set up this thing of like the women that Kirk gets with that they never mention again.
Yeah.
The marine biologist who comes into the future and it is like, well, you don't know anything anymore, and everything you've ever studied is dead. So you could be the expert of these two whales and hope that they bloody survive, because otherwise your expertise is no longer needed.
Yeah. But she gets a ship, doesn't
she? Does. She gets like a science ship or something, doesn't she?
Yeah.
It's who you know. That's what it is. But yeah, Star Trek 3, wonderful, wonderful movie. I'm sure eventually we will cover all the Star Trek films. We've done a couple of Next Gen now, haven't we? We've done Generations. Have we done First Contact?
We've done First Contact as well. Yeah,
I think we have.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're likely to do a past First Contact, are we?
I can't really be arsed, if I'm honest. But I would happily do. No, and I mean, Insurrection's not great either. No. I would happily cover all of the TOS movies, though. I think. Yes. Ultimately. Mm-hmm. But much like Hammer, we're not going to do them all now. We'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
But yes, in any case, that was Star Trek 3. Obviously recommend it, but you really, I'd recommend watching at least 1 to 4 and 6, but you might as well watch 5 while you're there. It's got some nice character moments, but
it's the stinker of the bunch, but it still has a lot to offer.
Yeah, I think so. It's got some great character moments, like you said. It's got the best McCoy moment, but this film, I really think it. I think is a wonderful film. Really,
it's a completely worthy sequel of The Wrath of Khan.
It was never going to match Wrath of Khan.
No,
but it's fine. So yes, in any case, we will be back next week with our usual review fare. But until then, stay safe, take care, and we will catch you next time.